Everyone, I'd like to welcome Diego from Poly, excuse me, and he is going to help us open the meeting with a pledge. So Diego.
Everyone, please stand. Face the flag. Put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated.
Thank you, Diego. Okay. We are meeting remotely tonight and welcome all those who are participating by watching through YouTube. As a reminder, we welcome public comment and have provided a mechanism for you to make public comment by leaving voice messages to be played to the board and the public during our broadcast. If you wish to speak at a future meeting, please go to our public participation page on www.lbschools.net, which will give you more information about how to give public comment. As a reminder, in conformance with the Brown Act, when we hear testimony on an item that is not listed on the agenda, a full discussion of that topic would have to be delayed until such time as the item can be publicly posted in advance as a regular agenda item. The board has been meeting in closed session regarding matters listed on today's closed session agenda and wishes to report that no reportable actions were taken. Next, we have public hearing. There is none. A call for agenda items for separate action or adoption of the agenda.
Move approval.
President Craighead, we'd like to request two changes on the purchasing and contracts reports. We request a change for number 2 on the purchasing and contracts report. We request that the name of the vendor be changed from Divock Diagnostics to Specialty Diagnostics Incorporated. This is the same company operating under a different name. We also request a change for number 4 on the purchasing and contracts report. We request that the cost per test be changed from $55 to $21. Thank you.
That's a good change.
So I move approval of the agenda as amended.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor by roll call vote. Dr. Benitez?
Aye.
Ms. Kerr?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Otto?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Hearing no opposition or abstentions, that passes 5-0. Approval of minutes.
I move to approve.
Move approval.
Second.
Discussion. I'll just thank Letitia for making the addition of the names for people who spoke and added their public testimony. Thank you for that. I know that's a new addition. Okay, all in favor by roll call vote. Dr. Benitez.
Aye.
Ms. Kerr.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Otto.
Aye.
And I vote aye. So hearing no opposed or abstentions, that passes 5-0. And now I'd like to introduce our student board member, Diego, and he can help us with his last name and properly pronounce it for us. And Diego is from Poly. So Diego, this is your opportunity to give us a report.
Sure, thank you so much. Good evening, Superintendent Dr. Baker, board members, LBC staff, and all of our LBC families out there. Thank you for having me. This is truly an honor. My name is Diego Kagurabadza. I'm a senior at Long Beach Poly High School, and I'm here to represent our ASB as student body president. So we began the school year with a series of successful in-person registration events. Our ASB distributed schedules, textbooks, technology to all grade levels in a COVID-safe and socially distanced manner. Our Dean of Students, Mr. Schock, even managed to hold a brief student expectations assembly in our staff parking lot, which is aerated. And despite the virtual setting, we continue to provide our students with opportunities to serve the community. Through the fall, our Commissioner of Community Outreach, Rianne Ignacio, who now serves as my ASB secretary, organized our annual Thanksgiving food drive from home. With over 60 clubs participating, we received more than 1,000 canned goods from our students, which were promptly donated to the Long Beach Rescue Mission. This was actually 300 more cans than we collected last year in an in-person semester. So obviously our Jackrabbits are always prepared to provide support in the community. More recently, our international ambassadors, of which I also serve, has organized a clothing drive to provide inventory for our rabbit hole. In a more traditional school year, the Rabbit Hole is an on-campus resource center for students to receive school supplies, hygiene products, and the like at no cost to the student. Our group has coordinated an effort to reach students with financial needs and will soon be able to distribute all requested items. And we've received donations from all over the community, including clubs, teachers, and especially our alumni. And in a year filled with social advocacy and awareness, our student leaders have taken to social media to celebrate National Heritage Months and promote student mental health. More and more, we've realized that our students don't just learn from their teachers, but from their friends, their communities, and their lived experiences. Before winter break, our 6-time Grammy award-winning music department, led by Mr. Doko, Mr. Scipio, and Mr. Stevens, produced a holiday music album titled Happy Poly Days. The 20-track album features our choir, our jazz band, and orchestra, as well as several other Poly Music alumni. This is our first, if not the district's first, music album produced entirely by a high school organization. If you'd like to show support, you can find the album on all major streaming networks or platforms like Spotify and Apple Music. Our student commission, led by our activities director, Mr. Puth, continues to meet every other day via Zoom, where we organize virtual spirit weeks, club activities, and other fundraisers. Of course, Poly wouldn't be Poly without its athletics department, and one of ASB's most recent projects, led by our Commissioner of Photography, Ryan Chalmers, celebrates the achievements and tenacity of our student athletes. The videos, titled Stuck in the Rabbit Hole, interview coaches and players at their in-person practices to recognize their perseverance. The first video featuring our girls swim and dive team is available on the Poly Instagram page for those who are curious. Our athletics are preparing for what will be an unusual start to the season, but we are nonetheless grateful to return. Speaking for all the Jackrabbits, I think we're most looking forward to our first football game, which is next week at Cabrillo. Again, thank you all so much for this opportunity to report on the activities at Poly. I'm sure many of you are surprised that we've managed to do so much in a virtual school year, but that's just what Jackrabbits do. As our alum Billie Jean King once said, champions adjust, and we certainly have. Thank you.
Wow. That was a fabulous report, and you are correct. I am one of the happily surprised people to hear about all that's going on virtually and everything you've managed to do without even, being in person and helping your community. That's very heartwarming and touching. Now, we kind of have an idea of what your plans are for next year because you've been featured in one of our videos, but just to remind everybody what your plans are, would you like to share that now?
Of course. Well, nothing is final, but so far I've been accepted to Stanford University, UC Santa Cruz, Sacramento State, and Cal State Long Beach.
Excellent. What would be your dream school out of that list?
I think I'd have to say Stanford.
Okay, well, good luck to you in the future. Thank you so much for being with us. We understand you may be busy and you might not be able to spend the evening with us. You're welcome to stay, but we do understand if you need to go. So thank you, Diego.
Of course, thank you. I think, did someone have a question for me, maybe?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Mr. Miller.
Hey, Diego, I just wanted to congratulate you, give you a little bit of context on how your name first came up to me. So, as I'm getting more ingratiated with the schools in my district, I interviewed a number of principals. The very first principal that I interviewed was who I call Coach Salas because he was my high school football coach, and he's actually your principal over there at Poly. And as I'm going through my interview questions with him, he was telling me about his local ASB and this star student he had, Diego. And so it's pretty exciting to get to talk to you, man, and just wanted to congratulate you and tell you to keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. It really means a lot. ASB has definitely been the most significant thing in my high school career. So I'm really glad for the opportunity to be here.
And Diego, this is Doug Otto. Reach out to me through the office, and I'd love to talk to you. I am a Stanford alumni, and it was a while ago. I think it's a little different now, but I was there very recently for some things that I had to do, and I'd love to share my thoughts and like to hear more about you if you've got a chance. So thanks.
Of course, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Sure.
Wow. Well, that's wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you, Diego, for being with us. Okay. Next, we will go to communications. And I believe tonight we will be highlighting a staff member.
Yes, Mr. Itzen will cue the video that is a feature of one of our staff members.
My name is Sam Keo. I am a parent coordinator for the Long Beach Unified School District. Currently, I am with the Office of Equity, Access, College and Career Readiness. I have been with the Long Beach Unified School District since 1990. My first 2 years, I was a college aide at Willard Elementary School. And then I became a community worker. And then I started my current job in 2001. We understand that the mission of Long Beach Unified School District is to make sure that all stakeholders understand what we are doing to help our kids be back in school, especially during the pandemic. So this is a very critical time for translator/interpreter. We are the voice for the community. So we want to make sure that when there is meeting, when there is anything that needs to be translated, we want to be precise, we want to be on time, so that messages can be sent out to the community, and parents and community as a whole can understand what the district is trying to do to make sure that we are safe and bring our children back in school as soon as possible. And the translator has a very important role in this, because we want to make sure that all stakeholders understand. In my office, I have the sticker that says, do it with passion or not at all. So being a translator, being a voice for community is my passion. I have been doing this for a very long time. So I do my best. I do exactly what's being asked to do, because I want to make sure that our community here, our community receive the exact information that is coming from the school district. And again, all of this comes from my heart because of my passion.
Wow, that's wonderful. You know, that was a brief video, but so uplifting. So thank you to Mr. Keo, and thank you to Mr. Itzen for creating that video for us to enjoy. Since we are under communications, I forgot to mention at the top of the meeting that when we convene next time for our board workshops later this month, we will be meeting in person, and we will be conducting our meeting at Browning High School, and we have workshops slated for March 16th and 17th, and then our next board meeting, March 17th. So we will be meeting in person at that time, and I just wanted to mention that before we go further on the agenda. Okay, so that brings us to public testimony on items listed on the agenda. So we're ready for that now.
Hi, my name is Laura Maxwell, and I have a middle schooler at Bancroft Middle School and a high schooler at Milliken High School as a freshman. Both kids have not been on either campus at all in their young years. And I would like to address an item on the agenda of reopening schools. I do not feel it is in the best interest of all of these students to open schools this late. I do have many concerns as to why this should not happen. Speaking for middle school, I find it rather appalling to send kids back on campus and implement a hybrid schedule while losing 2 synchronous days weekly, all to accommodate 17 in-person hybrid days. So our kids are going to be losing out on 2 synchronous days weekly to implement this. Many questions that I have. Number one is, what have our teachers been told that they can and can't do so our kids know what to expect if they're on campus? Is live streaming an option so our kids can all have the same teachers? What does lunch look like for our child if we're on campus? Will our children have all the same teachers that they've had all year long, regardless of the plan we choose? What does the actual instruction look like on campus? Will they just be on Chromebooks, sitting in a 6-foot square? And what about uniforms? You know, going back on campus for 17 days, are we really all having to go out and buy new uniforms that our kids probably won't be able to wear after this school year? And what happens if we do go online, or I'm sorry, what happens if we do go back on campus and it is absolutely misery for my child? What's the plan at that point? I look forward to these questions being addressed, and I thank you for your time.
My name is Brenda Dernan, and I am commenting on agenda item 22 in the open session. I just finished reading about Governor Newsom's newest plan for the reopening of our schools. Almost every headline I have read states that a deal has been made. When we are dealing with the education of our youth and doing what is right for their mental health and well-being of all of our students, no deal should ever be made. Instead, we should be doing what we all know is right for our students and what is best for them, and that is bringing them back immediately to in-person school. Time and time again, we have been told to listen to the science. We have watched neighboring school districts successfully bring back all of their students to in-person learning with very little spread of COVID-19. The science says that in-person school is not only safe, but it is the best place for our students. Our teachers have now received the vaccines. Our district now has a solid plan to bring students back. It is past time for our district to do what is best for our youth. They need to start thinking about the mental health and well-being of all of our students. They need to be brought back, our students, to in-person school. Thank you.
Good evening, LBUSD Board. My name is Suzanne Fleischman, and I'd like to comment on item 22 during the open session on March 3rd, 2021. I'd like to voice my continued support for the reopening of Long Beach schools. I am both a district employee and a parent of 2 high school students attending LBUSD schools, and I wholeheartedly applaud your efforts to continue moving toward getting students back to in-person instruction. I implore you, do not lose the momentum that has been gained. While we have made the best of a challenging situation thus far, distance learning is not the best for all students and families, and teachers for that matter. I know many who were very happy today to log on to ParentView and reconfirm their choice to come back to campus. While there is no one plan that will please everyone in every way, it's all about the ability to have a choice and decide what's best for our children. Thank you for that.
Good evening. My name is Siri Connor. I am speaking in reference to agenda item 22 for the March 3rd, 2021 agenda. I am the parent of a second grade student at Cleveland Elementary. I spoke at last meeting to request a saliva test as an alternative to anterior nasal swab testing for students who are unable to tolerate a nasal swab. I am speaking tonight to reiterate my request and to advocate for equitable access to information surrounding weekly COVID testing of our students. By their own admissions, Doctors Brown and Baker have stated that asymptomatic COVID testing is not a requirement to return to school, but a guideline they have chosen to adopt. Acknowledging some teachers and families may feel this is a necessary step for their safe return, I asked for an alternative type of test to be made available. In reality, however, parental consent is required for any COVID testing on a child under the age of 13. Per the Department of Public Health and the CDC states, it is unethical and illegal to test someone who does not want to be tested, including students whose parents or guardians do not want them to be tested. I understand the return to school is complex, made more so by the myriad of thoughts and feelings about how and when it should occur. It can be easy to lose focus in that sea of complexities of who and what is important. To be an advocate is to lend a voice to the voiceless. Access to information should not only be for the voices that are heard, but for all the voices represented by them. I urge all involved to keep all stakeholders in focus moving forward, as choices can only be made when all information is presented. Thank you.
My name is Teresa McKiernan. I want to address the reopening of schools. I am a parent. I have 2 students in the system, and every school board meeting, parents and students have been given a new date, pushed further and further back for when our students will be able to resume just a couple of days per week of in-person learning. And I know that this board has likely heard from some teachers who want to push back the hybrid option until the fall, saying it's not worth it to pursue this in the spring for a short period of time. And I want to urge you not to do that. Do not delay. Your responsibility is to students and to do what is in their best interest. Schools have been open around the country. They're open in our state private schools that applied for waivers, and schools in other states, large schools, urban schools, have been open under far less restrictive measures than we have here in California. We have study after study after study that has shown there has not been significant spread of COVID in schools. It's abundantly clear that it is safe to reopen schools. It is safe for students, and it is safe for teachers. It is safe for school staff. We also have countless studies and statistics that show the damage that the school closures have inflicted on students, from mental health struggles to learning losses. And those learning losses translate to negative health impacts that exceed any possible impact that they will have from COVID. And those learning losses can lead to issues that will shorten those students' life expectancy. This is serious impact that the closures are having on students. So please, I urge you, follow the science, put the politics aside, and do what's in students' best interest, and commit to providing them with an in-person learning option as soon as possible. Thank you.
Agenda item number 22, school reopening. My name is Rebecca Stack. I'm a property owner and parent of a 9th grader at Milliken, 5th grader at Bircham. My opinion is that there should not be any other topic on this agenda other than the school's reopening as soon as possible at all levels. The health department thresholds have been met. You need to open the schools now. That is your one and only function, to educate our children. Do it now, not tomorrow, not next week, not next month.
Hi, this is comment is for agenda item number 22 for the March 3rd, 2021 board meeting. Good evening, board members, Dr. Baker, and executive staff. My name is Amy Allen, and I am a teacher at Naples Elementary. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you again tonight regarding the urgency and importance of reopening our schools. On Monday, when my first graders and I were looking at the new March calendar, I asked them if they noticed anything. Our virtual calendar has a variety of images to represent important dates for the month. Someone said, I see a dolphin. I asked, well, what do you think it's for? Someone answered, is that when we get to come back to school? Yes, exactly. And everyone celebrated. My students, their families, and I are eagerly awaiting the return to school on March 29th. I can see that my principal, office staff, and custodial staff are working very hard to make this happen for our community of learners who wish to return. Naples is ready to reopen. This reopening is one of the most exciting things of this school year. I know that we're going to be fine. I am not worried, and many of my close colleagues are not worried. Please do not listen to the fear narrative that is coming from some teachers and community members. We have to press on. We must do this for our kids. They are the ones we work for, right? In the famous book that I've signed many times for parents to give to their child when they graduate from high school, Oh, the Places You'll Go, Dr. Seuss wrote, you're off to great places. Today is your day. Your mountain is waiting, so get on your way. Let's get on our way, Long Beach Unified. Let's do this. With appreciation, Amy Allen, teacher, Naples Elementary.
Hi, my name is Kathy Dumalski. This is regarding item 22. And the number one reason I'm leaving a voice message is because I'm not able to attend the in-person meeting. And that would be because in my job, in which I'm essential, I am currently in Texas, and I'm going to be here all week. I'm a frequent traveler. My kids are in a dual immersion Spanish language elementary school. My kindergartner had to start school this year online, learning a foreign language. My second grader is in his third year online, learning a foreign language. The fact that I'm in Texas doing business and with no mask, in that I have to return to California where my kids can't even go to school, it's ludicrous. There is nothing preventing me from, quote unquote, bringing this virus back. We have to learn to live with this virus. It is affecting 0.001% of our population. And we are sacrificing the vast majority of public education in California for no good reason. I think the kids that are most at risk are the parents not calling this line. The kids most at risk aren't concerned parents who can afford private school. We can afford private school. We don't want to go to private school. We bought our home. We live 500 feet from Patrick Henry Elementary School, a premier dual immersion class. I, as a taxpayer, should not have to change schools, and I will not change schools so long as we are in person. But the fact that I'm in Texas and these kids have been in school since August, the fact that San Juan Capistrano in our own neighborhood just a couple miles south, are back in school as of last year. There are schools all around us with kids back in class, in normal class. I think it is lazy.
Hi, my name is Angela, and I'd like to address item number 22, school reopening update. I'm an extremely concerned middle school parent right now. I don't understand why the high schools are able to live stream for those choosing to stay online to avoid disruption of their classes, but it is not the same for middle school students. Our middle school students are going to suffer with a schedule change. They will suffer both academically and emotionally just for the possibility of going in person for 17 or 18 school days. You all say that their emotional well-being and health is first, so accommodate that for those choosing to stay online. Let our middle school kids keep their same teachers, their same classrooms, classes they've had since the beginning of the school year. If high school can do it, so can middle school. We've also had an informational meeting with our school, but there are so many unanswered questions. How do you expect us all to make a well-informed decision by March 12th when we don't have all of the information we need? I am asking that you please extend the deadline to allow for a fully informed decision and allow both in-person and online students to attend their same classes without any changes to their academic schedule. This is the most important thing given that our kids have been going through so much since the beginning of this pandemic. Thank you.
Hello, I'm speaking on agenda item 22, school reopening. Good evening, board members, Superintendent Baker, and staff. My name is Marisela de Rivera. I am a proud member of LBUSD District 1, member of LBUSD's Equity Leadership Team, and most importantly, an LBUSD parent of a fourth grader and a kindergartner. My children are among those that have thrived this year. Virtual learning has not been our preference. They both did better in person before the pandemic, but thanks to their truly exceptional teachers and the privilege of a stay-at-home parent, they have done far better than anyone can ask of children doing the impossible. My children will not be returning to in-person instruction because I do not believe it is in the best interest of the entire community, and because I believe in equity. There has been no equity in the development or implementation of LBUSD's reopening plan. There are children that do genuinely need in-person instruction right now. By not addressing needs versus wants, LBUSD has simply given in to the reopen at all costs crowd. Pardon. And that is incredibly disappointing. Children with IEPs, foster and unhoused children, those with very poor quality or no Wi-Fi, and the children of true essential workers should have been prioritized for return. They still should be. If we are going to claim we are a district seeking equity and justice, then we need to actually be a district that puts equity and justice into action. Not someday when we have a policy and all the planning has been done. Right now. Dr. King was correct. The time is always right to do what is right. LBUSD's plan does not do right by children historically left at a disadvantage, but there is still time. I urge the board to direct staff to take equity into account and create tiers for reopening, like there are for vaccination. Thank you for your time.
My name is David Pulitzer. I'm wanting to comment on the open session item number 22 with reopening schools. And I would like to request that the board continue moving forward with opening schools, ideally sooner than the postponed date, pushing us back to the end of March, knowing that we are clear to open schools. And now that we've moved into the red tier, we're definitely clear to open schools, that there shouldn't be a reason why we're waiting. I'm not requesting that we open schools for all students, but we definitely make it available for those students and families that feel their children will perform better with in-person learning, understanding that it'll initially only be a hybrid model. Would also like clarification from the board with respect to forcing nose swabs on a weekly basis. The CDC has put out that that is not a necessary action to take. And I know there are children out there, especially one of mine, based on their needs, that will be an issue. So again, I'm calling to request that the board continue plans with reopening for those students and families that want to come back to school in some type of model, the hybrid model, and that we push that forward because we should be able to open sooner, knowing that the board has put in plans and measures going back to March of last year. There shouldn't be any issues that would hold that back, and allow our youngsters who are struggling and falling behind because of not being in school to be able to start to progress and finally feel like a normal child again. Schools have been open in California and in other states successfully without outbreaks. So there is no reason to stop us from opening. Thank you for your time. Bye.
Hello, my name is Brenda Mustafa. The item I am addressing is item 22, the reopening of schools. This is for the session for Wednesday, March 3rd, Long Beach Unified School District Board meeting. Please reopen schools. Now that school staff and teachers have had the opportunity to get vaccinated and the schools have had the time to plan, set up protocols, and make purchases, it's time to reopen in a hybrid model. I have been teaching middle school in a hybrid model since October. To me, it's evident that the kids want to be in school. They want to discuss, they want to ask questions, they want clarification, they want social interaction. They are willing to have their temperatures checked, to wear masks, to hand sanitize, and to wipe their desks with disinfectant wipes. Learning at home is not always an environment conducive to learning. My own high school son is tired of being in what he calls a box. He asks me regularly, is it too much to be in a classroom? Not all students are successful with asynchronous learning. And in the high schools, oftentimes the in-person, the virtual learning, it's still asynchronous. Some students, like my son, are struggling. They are no longer motivated, they're depressed. Please reopen the schools in a hybrid model. Yes, it will be hard for teachers. Yes, it will be different. Yes, there will be a learning curve, but these students need a glimmer of hope. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Michelle. I live in District 5. I'm commenting on item 20, public testimony on items listed on the agenda because I'm talking about item 26, equity policy development. I'm a mom of 3. I'm a college educator, previously taught at Cal State Long Beach for almost a decade. I'm currently working at a community college on the tenure track. I've been an online educator for 12 years now, and I am extremely disheartened to see the way that LBUSD has addressed the equity issues that are connected to online learning. I have spent hundreds of dollars going to conferences to learn about equity online, accessibility, diversity, inclusion, and this isn't to toot my own horn. It's to point out that it takes a lot of training and a lot of time to teach online. Simply throwing Long Beach teachers online with a week's notice, very little training, and no expert trainers within the entire district led to problems that were completely preventable. If it's predictable, it's preventable. And having kindergartners and first graders and small children online for upwards of 6 hours a day is something that has not been replicated in other districts. Speaking of, other districts addressing equity have allowed their disabled students and students with IEPs or who needed assessments to come in person. In fact, in Cypress, just 10 minutes away from where I live, they have had their students in person for all disabled services since the very beginning of the pandemic, a year ago. I couldn't even get my daughter's speech assessment done. I was told to fill out a form and wait until there was in person. Since then, we've left the district, all 3 of my children. I am completely irritated at our board. You want to talk about equity? The board needs to take its power back from the superintendent. The board was elected by us, the voters. That's democracy. And to give all of the power over to someone that works for them is not what we voted for. Take your power back. It's not an emergency anymore. The vaccines are available. If you want equity, we need 5 people looking at this issue from different perspectives, representing different parts of our city. That's why we have district elected representatives. Thank you so much.
I'd like to address agenda item number 22, school reopening update. Dear School Board and Superintendent Baker, I'm calling to encourage you to wait to reopen schools until the fall, as the current plan will surely cause more stress on our students and teachers than it does help. If we want to return to a more normal-looking school year by the fall, let's give everyone in the community, spouses of teachers, all the parents and guardians, even high school students, a chance to get the vaccine this summer. We are at a crossroads, and we know that COVID can actually be harmful to children, specifically to their hearts, even healthy ones. Why are we taking this great risk when we are so close to getting the general population vaccinated? I also know many parents find the current plan to reopen very inequitable. Why is it a good idea to have many young children switch to new teachers with only 2 months left of school? It will be like starting at the very beginning of the school year after the children have all finally adapted to their teachers and friends. And why are we taking away the valuable student-teacher instruction time? I calculated that my 5th grader will lose over 120 hours of instruction time in the remaining 2.5 months of school. Can you explain how that is helpful to any of our students? And what are we trading this for? So students can see some friends again in a very strict, controlled environment. The in-person model is in no way better or an improvement on pedagogy. And also, let's face the facts. The wealthier schools have about 80% of students going back in person, while lower income areas have a much lower percentage of students going back. That creates an even greater divide. Many families are not able to swing the 2.5 hours of day of school if they work full time. And a lot of families who have already had family members die of COVID, it is a life or death choice for the kids to return to school. We need to think more of our greater community and not choose individualism over human life. Let's be patient and start fresh for the fall when more families can be safe in school. Thank you.
Deanna Auger, addressing item 22. I currently have a 2nd grader at Cubberley Elementary. It is imperative that our children go back to school as soon as possible. Their physical, emotional, and mental well-being is at stake here. Schools across the state are opening up. Most have been hybrid for months already. Cypress School District, which isn't far from ours, is open 5 days a week for full-day in-person instruction. We're losing students to homeschooling, charters, and other districts because distance learning is not an adequate substitution for in-person learning. Please provide evidence that our children in distance learning are developing equally in comparison to in-person instruction. Studies are showing a low rate of transmission within the school setting when precautions are taken. I'd be more than happy to forward these articles for you to read. Our children need to go back to school, and our children have suffered enough over this past year. Thank you.
Good evening, board members. My name is Amber Vera Mendoza, and I'm speaking on agenda item 22 with school reopening. I'm a proud parent of a 1st grader and a 3rd grader at LBUSD. I know there are no solutions that will appease everyone, and there are many families who are facing very real and difficult challenges these times. I've yet to talk to any parent, guardian, or educator who does not want their kids back in school. However, there are many concerns and vital issues we still have not heard the board or the superintendent address. Number 1, safety. I read your safety plan for returning students to school. Ventilation for schools that have no HVAC is not addressed. We have a number of schools that fall under this category. Why has this not been publicly addressed? What is the plan for those schools? Also listed on that plan is to utilize cleaning wipes for cleaning. Does this mean baby wipes, which have been used in the past, or disinfecting wipes? There is a huge difference between the two. Vaccination and teachers, number 2. What will happen if a teacher chooses not to get vaccinated, then is exposed to, or worse, is infected, and now their class has to go home and quarantine for 14 days? The kids are right back where they started, online. How disruptive and harmful will it be for that kindergartner, 1st grader, 2nd grader, and even 3rd grader who finally got to see their teachers and friends in person only to be sent back home to be back online? Number 3, equity. There are families and children who should have and still should be prioritized for returning. For example, children and families who still do not have adequate Wi-Fi, families with IEPs, foster youth, true essential workers and families, or families and children experiencing homelessness. You should have taken into the account the need versus the want. Those are also 2 very different things. This leads me to my final point. I know you know consistency and knowing what comes next is imperative to children's well-being and feeling safe. With only about 51 days or 11 weeks left of this school year, why disrupt what the kids, families, teachers, and school administrators have worked so hard for to create some sense of consistency and routine during a year of uncertainty? Opening at all costs is still costing. It will cost teachers, school administrators, staff, students, and families. For what? 2.5 hours for 11 weeks? That is unacceptable. For months and at every board meeting I was able to listen to, a loud majority of teachers, parents, and community members have all said and pleaded to you to please stay virtual for the remainder of the year. Why do you continue to ignore us? What is the point of public comment if you're just going to ignore the very people you're supposed to represent? Listen to your employees, listen to the parents.
My name is Noah Thomas. I'm addressing the issue of reopening schools.
Is that all we had time for?
Yes, we are up to the 30 minutes.
Okay. How many more did we have?
I believe we have 2 more callers.
2 more. Without objection, we'll go ahead and listen to those 2 more, the additional 2.
Sounds good, Madam President.
Okay.
Please consider waiting to reopen for in-person learning until the fall, when we have had a chance to vaccinate more of our community. There are multiple problems with reopening schools right now. Many classrooms are inadequately ventilated. Teachers are not fully vaccinated. Students can transmit COVID to others and pass it to their families who are not vaccinated. On top of this, what is the purpose of reopening at this time? We've calculated that our elementary kids will receive about 100 fewer hours of in-person instruction with their teachers because of the reduced schedule. Middle schools will only meet 2 days a week, so instruction is actually less than it is currently. I implore you to please reconsider reopening on April 1st. Thank you. Bye.
Hi, my name is Danielle Akiro. I'm commenting on item 22, school reopening. I'm a parent of an LBUSD kindergartner. I'm also a former educator. My concern about reopening is that if it's a wants-based reopening, and a lot of people are.
Hi, my name is Gav McKiernan. I'm addressing, I believe it's item number 22, about the reopening of the schools for in-person learning. I have 2 children in the school district, and I'm a longtime Long Beach resident and taxpayer. And it is imperative that we reopen the schools as soon as possible. I'd love to see it happen sooner than the end of March date that has been set, but we cannot go backwards. I would like the board to consider that if today the schools had been open and we were suddenly in the situation with the spread of the COVID and what we know about it today, would they be considering closing the schools? And I'm confident that that answer is no, that we would not be closing the schools under the current situation, which means we should be opening them. Also know that the online and distance learning is not working for many, many students, and the impact of that in depression, suicide, any number of other negative impacts is huge and far, far outweighs the impact of possibly some people getting sick, while at the same time, the impact of possible sickness is minor at best based on what we know about the lack of community spread in other school districts around the country. We are not branching out into unknown territory. We have school districts around the country that we know have not been a cause of new community spread, and we need to follow their lead. Thank you.
That was all of them now.
Okay, thank you. So now we move to public testimony on items not listed on the agenda.
Robert Collins, item not on the public agenda. Hello, board. Thank you for listening to the many diverse perspectives of parents that help inform your decisions. Tonight, I'd like to share my perspective on my son's experience during the pandemic. He attends Tencher Preparatory School as a 7th grade student. He has received a quality education both last spring and this school year. His teachers are kind and mostly reasonable in the work they assign. I'm a retired teacher who has been able to stay home to monitor and assist him with his schoolwork. He often needs help. As a parent and former teacher, there have been several times that as I helped my son with his work, I got an uncomfortable feeling. This feeling was not about my son, but about me wondering how students with limited resources would handle the assignment. Recently, I got that feeling when Tencher's math department decided to increase the amount quizzes contributed to grades by 10%. I understand the change was within district policy, but wonder how this change would affect students already struggling. Will more students now fail? I asked if the math department had done any analysis of how this new grading policy would have affected students' math grades first semester. There was no interest in answering my question. This same week, I got the feeling when a teacher assigned homework that took my son a very long time to complete with assistance. How were students doing with less resources? The same week again, the teacher gave an assignment that my son, with my assistance, was not able to complete. How were students doing with less resources? Yesterday, my son spent over 3 hours studying for the test in this class. Again, how are students doing with less resources? There's an abundance of evidence that shows that kids are mostly affected by the pandemic, come from protected classes, and many of these children come from low-income households. The pandemic did not create these inequities our children face, but have exacerbated them. Why are we doing things to increase these inequities? Let's not pretend the pandemic is over until it's over. Let's mitigate all the factors of the pandemic that we can, particularly for students with less privileges, so that all our students can succeed.
Marcy Rousas, item that is not on the agenda. Dear board members and executive staff, I've proudly served as a psychologist in the Long Beach Unified School District for 27 years. I'm here today to express my concern about the results of a recent vote conducted by TALB for the psychologists to indicate whether they show support for being represented members of TALB. TALB provided the psychologists with frequently asked questions in writing where they stated that a 2/3 majority would be needed to demonstrate support. The same statement was also provided in informational sessions hosted by TALB, yet they changed to a 51% majority, with many of us only finding this out when the results of the vote were provided. How is this allowed? There were also discrepancies in the number of people who were eligible to vote versus the number of ballots that were sent out. It wasn't clear who was eligible to vote in terms of the type of contract you have, or if you do not have a contract and work hourly. Nonetheless, a larger number of ballots than the number of psychologists we have on staff were sent out according to the results from the Simply Voting Company. We have no idea who received a ballot. How can we trust this vote as being legitimate? TALB promised that the process would be transparent. However, the process was not clear in many aspects. I didn't find out that the voting was happening until the day before. Some of my colleagues didn't know at all. Who was eligible to vote was never clearly defined. The terms for reaching a majority changed. None of this important information to help make a decision that could completely change how we do things was reported to us by TALB in a transparent way. For these reasons, I'm asking that the board does not accept the vote as a demonstration of support for the psychologists to be recognized as part of TALB. Thank you for your time and attention.
Hello, my name is Brian Hannon. I would like to bring your attention to, I guess it would be item number 21, items not on the agenda for tonight's meeting, March 3rd, 2021. I have two students who have been in Long Beach Unified. I had a son graduate last year from Millikan High School, and I currently have a sophomore at Millikan. I'm concerned about the grading policy that Long Beach Unified and Millikan have either adopted or not adopted regarding distance learning. My sophomore has had issues this year with his grades. He's never had issues in the past. He's always been a good student. And he is struggling due to distance learning, due to not being able to be on campus physically, interact with his peers, and interact with his teachers. I've spoken with his teachers this year, and I've also spoken with his counselor at Millikan and the assistant principal. I don't believe that he's being properly supported by the district or by the school in general. His teachers have been wonderful. However, I don't think that the teachers have been given guidance by the school district on how to grade properly or assess students this year. At any rate, I have expressed my concerns to the teachers, to the counselor, and to the assistant principal, Ms. Filer at Millikan. I've also sent an email directly to Mr. Vega, who's the principal, and to the people in the district office. I sent a copy Dr. Baker and Edward Samuels on an email. I'm really concerned because Mr. Vega, who I sent an email to nearly 2 weeks ago, has never responded to me. Not even a courtesy email back that he received the email and someone else will handle it. Dr. Baker has not responded, nor has Edward Samuels. So my concerns are in the email regarding grading. And
Robbie Allison, item number 22, public testimony on items not listed on the agenda. Hello, my name is Robbie Allison, and I'm the father to a 5th grade superstar who attends online school via Zoom at Los Cerritos Elementary School. I have spoken before this board previously, and it is clear that I need to go in another direction with my testimony. I am recording this message for our kids. Over the past year, through all of this, what seems to be useless dialogue, a voice for our children is largely missing. We have unions speaking on behalf of our teachers, and it seems to me that we need a stronger voice for whom decisions are made, our kids. So on that note, for every listening parent who has a child in online school or any variation thereof, this is for your champion. When I think of the word bravery, I think of our soldiers in the military fighting for our freedoms. I think of outspoken leaders who express beliefs no matter the consequence. But now I think of you, the students of online learning, who are heroes to me, the students who are ripped away from their friends, their school, and their normal everyday life. Over the past year, not much has changed for you. A temporary change seems to be never ending, yet you carry on. And even though some have lost the battle, they fought it with all their might. Facing the difficulty, facing more days of unpredictability, you carry on. You are the heroes here. Hold your heads high, hold on to your dreams, walk taller than you ever have before. In a time full of uncertainty, I am certain of this. You are the newest faces of bravery. Thank you.
Tonya Reyes-Ranga, 90806, and speaking on items not listed. One way the board communicates information to the community is through its board agenda. If we do not have time to see a meeting, then the easiest way to get information is to read the agenda in minutes. I have a few comments regarding the agenda. First, minutes. If you missed the last meeting, you should be able to read the board minutes, but minutes from the last meeting are not included in the agenda package, nor are they listed in the LBUSD website before the next meeting. The last meeting minutes available as of last night were minutes from January 13th, over 4 meetings ago. Second, staff reports. Most staff reports are oral reports and information-only items. At the meeting of December 13th, K-8 consolidation, school consolidation was listed under new business. The action item was a vote to close Hudson and Cooperley Middle Schools. The vote was taken and it was done with no prior written notice on the agenda, as was the closure of Beach School, High School. Critical action items should at least include a prior written notice via staff reports, even if they are for information only, as they can serve to give notice on important upcoming votes. Third, business items. All business items are action items, yet very little time is spent on these. Local expenditures in school districts are close to $600 billion nationwide, outspending utilities and police and fire expenditures combined, and city municipal expenditures they've come close to what the school district pays out in direct spending, procurement, and contracting. In today's short agenda, well over $28 million plus will be approved, and most meetings expenditures are in the $50 million plus category, yet not one comment or explanation is given at the board meeting. Member Kerr is usually the only one to comment, but it's to recuse herself and states that she has, quote, a potential financial interest as her husband works for a subcontractor, unquote. While serving on Long Beach City Council, I only experienced 2 members who abstained twice in 8 years, yet Ms. Kerr has done this for the last 40 meetings. Can someone explain this? Fourth, information/action items. The description is used often and on today's agenda under items 24, 25, and 26, and always for the equity policy development update. So are these information items or action items? And if they're action items, I assume they will include an attached written report. And if they're information items, do they never include a written report except for the equity update? Fifth, my pet peeves, attachments are not numbered and the website only allows access to 3 years of agenda and minutes. I hope you are considering changes to the agenda, and any changes you make should be for the benefit of increasing transparency. I want to thank the parents who are at every board meeting they watch for the rest of us, grandparents, foster parents, guardians, and busy moms and dads. These involved parents are at every meeting. They send out reminders, announcements, and calls to action when needed. I want to thank them for their efforts, which at times are more informative than the agenda itself. Thank you.
Madam Chair, could we stop the public comment, please?
Board members and the executive staff.
Yes.
I'd like to make a correction for the record because this is the second time. Board meeting. So my husband works for a subcontractor who has done work for some of the contractors who do work for the district. This company doesn't do work for the district, but they've done work for some of the district's contractors. That's not a problem under the law. Failing to disclose it and failing to recuse myself would be a problem. To suggest that my steering clear of any decisions or discussions related to these contracts is somehow improper and simply false.
Thank you for that clarification. We can now resume with the public comment not listed on the agenda.
My name is Catherine Lee, and I have been working as a school psychologist with our district for the past 20 years. I am calling in regard to the issues of psychologists being unionized into TALP at the board meeting on Wednesday, March 3rd. I'm very concerned due to the fact that TALP was not transparent regarding its voting process. Not all psychologists were given the opportunity to vote, as well as the eligibility status of psychologists voting was also questionable. Most importantly, the 2/3 majority of interest was not achieved as initially presented by TALP. I am very concerned to be represented by an organization that I can't place my trust upon. I appreciate your consideration into this very important matter and ask that you put a halt into the process of unionization of psychologists as a representative class. Thank you for all your time.
Good morning, board members and executive staff. This message is applicable to session on said date, March 3rd, 2021. My name is Shelley Cassidy, and I'm proud to say this is my 22nd year working as a school psychologist in LBUSD. Over the years, the topic of joining TALB has surfaced several times, but the majority of my colleagues, myself included, believed that we were cared for in a way that allowed us professionalism to effectively do our jobs. This isn't without saying that during the 22 years that having fewer and fewer colleagues spread across multiple sites was ever ideal. However, we understood it to be part of our state's economic and district budget. The current division that has resulted between our colleagues from the recent vote to join TALB has left those of us who are not in favor with many unanswered questions that beg the legitimacy of these results. For instance, why and when was the required 2/3 majority, or 66%, changed to a simple 51% majority? I am one who discovered this blatant discrepancy the day I received the results of the election in a congratulatory email from TALB. This was never shared by TALB or any of the proponents of union representation, which is akin to voter suppression and presents the antithesis of fair and free elections. In fact, there are at least 2 written indicators of the 2/3 majority and how any percentage otherwise would not be in TALB's interest to include our group due to not having a large enough consensus. There appear to be 54 LBUSD school psychologists, yet the TALB voting documentation provided to the group notes that 67 people were eligible to vote. This is very confusing and is creating speculation that some people who voted are ineligible due to their contract specification as substitutes or temporary employees. We are requesting full disclosure of who voted and who TALB considers eligible to vote. This is especially because to consider the results of only 29 colleagues who are in favor of joining TALB only represents a mere 43% of our group. In this political climate, please know that I share many of the progressive political causes that unions, like TALB, support, and I am not seeking relief from this body based on any anti-union sentiment. Instead, this is what I believe to be a flawed and undermined vote for representation that was seemingly capitalized on during a global pandemic. I truly appreciate your time and consideration to this extremely important matter and value the opportunity to express my concern about the conduct of this election for union representation, as well as my desire to not be part of the represented class.
Jerlene Tatum, LBUSD parent, zip code 90810, non-agendized item. Good afternoon, LBUSD board and administrative staff. I would like to begin by acknowledging my child's first grade teacher, Ms. Yuko. Ms. Yuko, I want to publicly state how much I appreciate you. I don't know how you show up every morning with a smile on your face and a smile in your voice. This pandemic has taken a toll on many of us, yet for me and my child, you are sunlight on our darkest days. Thank you. Now to the Board of Education. Last week, I viewed the special meeting of the Board on Board Development, Student Outcomes Focused on Governance. I was very happy to learn that the board is currently going through the process of board governance. I have come to the conclusion that some board members have forgotten who they were elected to serve. So to hear the facilitator say repeatedly that community vision, values, and student data is how the district should be making decisions almost brought me to tears. Tears of joy, that is. I do have a few suggestions or requests. Please inform the community, the viewer, why your sessions are hosted as board meetings and are not private. When you begin your outreach and engagement efforts, please look outside of your current LBUSD sanctioned groups. Please be bold, please be willing to do something different, and no, the superintendent selection community meetings is not a model you should be mimicking. Since these development sessions are live streamed for everyone to see, please just don't say what you think we want to hear or what sounds good. The community needs for each of you to actually reflect the community's vision and values, not just pretend you do. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Pavlina Dostal. I'm a school psychologist with Long Beach Unified School District. And I would like to comment on the agenda for conversation with TALB negotiators for today's meeting. And I have concerns about the psychologists being added to the TALB union at this time, because I wasn't aware that the vote will be so quick without not enough information being provided and enough time to process and find out enough information. Plus, it was unclear who can vote. Me personally, I am an hourly psychologist on the staff, and I'm not even sure still whether I am eligible to vote or not.
Good morning, board members and executive staff. My name is Talitha Villegas, and I am proud to say that this is my 15th year working as a school psychologist in Long Beach Unified School District. I would say over the years, there has been talk of joining TALB. It was, I would say, more or less a surface conversation at times. But it never really came to fruition in terms of even a group discussion within our group. And we pretty much understood that due to our state economic and district budgets, that fewer colleagues that were being spread thin, that this would be somewhat of a concern. But the discussion that TALB would be able to advocate for the things that we need as a school psychologist was understood that it was not something that would be addressed with TALB, but more or less through our national and state association. My concern regarding the voting, though, was that TALB was not transparent with the process and did not stick to the voting majority that was expressed in their meetings and in writing, which feels deceptive. And it brings into question whether we can trust an organization that would be deceptive in terms of what the voting process was expressed to be, but was not held to that standard. A 2/3 vote was not reached, and I myself is questioning the voters' eligibility status. There appears to be 54 school psychologists in Long Beach Unified School District, yet the night that we saw the voting results, it showed that 67 people were eligible to vote, which is very confusing and has caused a lot of confusion amongst us as a group, as well as division in our group. And it has created speculation that some people who voted are not eligible due to their contract. And we are requesting full disclosure of who voted and who TALB considers eligible to vote. This is especially because to consider the results of only 29 colleagues who are in favor of joining TALB only represents a near 43% of our group. I would say, as most of us feel, that in this political climate, we do share as a group, majority as a group, the progressive.
Hi, my name is Everett Groff, school psychologist in Long Beach Unified School District. And I just want to share my disappointment with the TALB vote for the psychologists joining the union. I did not get to vote, and I don't think that was fair. I hope this is addressed at the meeting. Thank you. Bye.
Hi, this is Dr. Friedoff, psychologist with the district. I was calling to express concern regarding our group joining TALB, particularly in terms of how the informational and voting process lack both clarity and transparency. I agree that having a voice is important, but it is disconcerting to have an organization representing us who has not demonstrated due diligence in even making sure our group was informed about the process, when the vote was taking place, and how they could support us. In fact, the exact opposite seems to have occurred and has created a great deal of mistrust and concern. For example, there are a minimum of 27 in our group, which is approximately half of us, who are requesting not to be part of the represented class. However, the union's vote results show only 18, illustrating the way in which they manage the voting process, excluded many in our group, and does not represent a majority. I would like to ask if the board to consider declining the recognition of school psychologists as a represented class, or at least a temporary halt until actions can be taken to address concerns. I thank you so much for your time and consideration in this matter. Thank you. Bye.
My name is Mariela Salgado, and I'd like to speak on a non-agenda item. Dear board members, district, and reopening parents, I'd like to say a few things. First, I wasn't ready to send my youngest back to school. But because most of her classmates made the choice to be in person, I was left with either lose her teacher or choose in person. My youngest loves her teacher. It will be a logistical nightmare for us with 2 kids, 1 in person, 1 online. Ready or not, we're in person. We aren't doctors or teachers or grocery workers. We own a small business, so we wait. I get it. I am too eager to see my kindergartner be in the classroom. But for me to say yes to reopen and in person completely ignores the importance of the 7,000 students who went missing at the beginning of the school year, the thousands of students who are struggling and need help. If we haven't gotten that right, what does this reopening mean for them moving forward? This virus has disproportionately impacted our Black, Brown, and Cambodian communities. To push to reopen without vehemently asking the district to address the disproportionate impact on kids of color is ignoring all the data and inequities this district, city, and many of our Long Beach neighbors are experiencing. I repeat, to push to reopen without vehemently asking the district to address the disproportionate impact on kids of color is ignoring all the data and inequities this district is facing. Consider this recent data. Zip codes with the least infection rates had the majority of vaccinations in Long Beach. Per Long Beach Post, the case rate for Wrigley is 137 per 1,000 residents, whereas Belmont Shore has 53 per 1,000 residents. Yet Belmont Shore had the highest vaccination rates at 48 per 1,000 versus 29 per 1,000 in Wrigley. What does this mean for each school site? There are likely stark differences between zip codes on in-person enrollment too. For many, what will happen to all the students that chose not to be in person and continue to struggle? The student who loses connection multiple times doesn't have a headset or motivation to continue. Do they lose priority in the midst of reopening? Parents continue to be left with more questions than answers, and hearing from our local press versus our school site or district communications is not okay. This is hard, but even harder to know there are households, kids struggling, in which we haven't met their educational and mental health needs first. Reopening for 2.5 hours won't solve these inequities. For most folks, sending a child during a full day's work for 2.5 hours was never an actual option. As we reopen, please continue to keep in mind, what does this look like for a student who doesn't have all the support systems or even the adequate tools to start their day virtually? My ask for our school board, school district, and reopening parents is to consider our most vulnerable. This time in history calls on us to consider others, our most vulnerable, our highest need students. We must not forget every student deserves a quality education, not just our own. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dr. Jennifer Yates, and I have been a school psychologist with Long Beach Unified School District for over 20 years. And I am calling in regard to the school psychologist being unionized by TALB, and I believe that's an issue that's going to be discussed at today's board meeting. I'm really concerned about the fact that it didn't seem that TALB was very transparent regarding the voting process for, at least for the school psychologists. Not all the psychologists were given an opportunity to vote. And it's not clear that the eligibility status of the psychologist was vetted. So I'm not sure who voted, if people votes were counted that maybe weren't qualified to vote. The biggest issue for me is that I had read that there was a 2/3 majority that had to be achieved in order for TALB to represent the school psychologists. And from what I understand, after I voted, I received an email stating that TALB had changed the requirement to 51% instead of 2/3 majority. And I got that email at the same time that I learned that we were going to be represented by TALB. I'm just very concerned in general. I don't feel that TALB has been transparent, and I don't feel that this is necessarily a group that I want to be a part of or that I can trust, given how this vote went. I appreciate your consideration into looking into this, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to stop and review this process. Thank you so much for your consideration. Bye-bye.
Good morning, board members and executive staff. My name is Joanna Singman, and I've been working in the LBUSD as a school psychologist for 9 years after doing both my practicum and internship hours here. I'm sad to see the division that has been caused in our group by our recent vote regarding TALB representation. I'm contesting the results of this vote for many reasons. First of all, why and when was the required 2/3 majority reduced to a simple 51% majority? I only discovered this change the day I received the results of the election in an email from Veronica Castillo of TALB. This was not shared by TALB or any of the proponents of the union representation. Secondly, there are 54 LBUSD school psychologists, yet the TALB voting documentation provided to the group indicates that 67 people were eligible to vote. Finally, I feel that there was a rush to have us join the union and that TALB took advantage of the pandemic and our desire to work from home to hold the vote. Politically, I share many of the progressive political causes that unions like TALB support, and I'm not seeking relief from this body based on any anti-union sentiment, but rather in what I believe to be a flawed and misrepresented vote for representation. I appreciate your time and consideration to this extremely important matter and value the opportunity to express my concern about the conduct of this election for union representation and my desire to not be a part of the represented class. Thank you.
We have reached the 30 minutes, Madam President.
Thank you. And are there more phone messages?
We have 2 more.
We have 2 more. Well, see, if there's no objection, we'll go ahead and do the 2 more. I'm looking around, I'm getting the okay. Thank you. Yes, 2 more.
You allowed 2 on the first one. You better
Hello, my name is Mary Williams. I work as a school psychologist in Long Beach Unified School District, and school psychologists were recently involved in a vote whether or not to join TALB. It seems as though there was some confusion for some people. I personally voted no against it, but I also thought there was a 2/3 majority by which the vote would need to pass for school psychologists to be part of TALB. Then I was notified later that it was 51%. And that was after I had placed my vote. I was a bit confused about the shift and the change. Also, I did not feel that I was fully informed as far as pros and cons and so forth. I realize it has been really targeting or more for teachers per se, but I did not feel like I was fully informed as far as the advantages of the position that I hold as a school psychologist. So I just wanted to add that to my input. I know there are several people who felt as though they did not have full information and would either like to have a revote or something of that sort. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Again, my name is Mary Williams. It is Wednesday, March 3rd, 2021.
Dear board members and executive staff, my name is Cynthia Stansberry, and I have been a psychologist with Long Beach Unified School District for 20 years. I'm concerned about the voting process to unionize school psychologists in Long Beach. Although I was afforded the opportunity to vote, because the process was not transparent, not all of my colleagues were afforded the same opportunity. There are concerns about who was actually eligible to vote, how many ballots went out versus how many eligible sites there are, and concerns about TALB's frequently changing scenarios about what majority would be needed to indicate support. Please do not accept this vote as an indicator that the majority of psychologists are on board to be a part of TALB. Thank you for your time. Goodbye.
So that is all of them.
Thank you. Dr. Baker.
Yes, thank you. I just want to make a point of clarification for the Board of Education that we are aware of the concerns that have been expressed by a number of psychologists tonight. We are in receipt of their written statements about their concerns, and we will be working to address those concerns with the Teachers Association of Long Beach.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, we have the staff report. So again, Dr. Baker.
Thank you, Mrs. Craighead. So I am going to build on the reopening of schools update that we did on February 17th and continue the conversation about our plans for reopening. I want to affirm the dates that have been put out to the community as the beginning of phasing in on March 29th. That is for families that chose the in-person learning for their students, and those that chose online will continue in the online program. This is good news for us, especially as the COVID case rates in our local community have decreased significantly, and we expect in the next couple of weeks to be entering the red tier. Tonight's presentation includes several aspects to it. I'm going to address some of the fiscal aspects. We are going to talk about the submission of the required documents to the health department, communication that's going out to elementary families tomorrow, the middle school instructional program, and the opportunity for us to talk about the visits that have gone on at sites this week to view school readiness from the perspective of board members and from staff. And so I'll get started. As many of you read in the news, there was a deal reached by the governor and legislature that was announced on Monday, March 1st, just this week. That was after a couple of months of negotiations. They landed on several different really important aspects of the return to school. So I just want to make 2 points of clarification as we talk about the reopening of schools tonight. The first is that school districts that return to in-person instruction by April 1st for TK through 5 children and with cohorts of vulnerable students are eligible to apply for a significant grant opportunity by the state. Long Beach Unified stands to apply for $23.5 million to support in-person instruction in the months ahead. And so because we are on schedule with our March 29th phase-in date for TK through 5th grade students, we will be eligible to apply for the in-person instruction grants that are being offered by the state. Secondly, there's a significant other grant, a learning recovery, also called expanded learning grant, that the district will be eligible for, which includes up to $55 million for our district for extended learning opportunities, for professional development, to address the needs of the social emotional needs of students. And I'll just point out that in that opportunity, 85% of those funds will need to be spent for in-person opportunities for students in the form of counseling and learning opportunities and enrichment. In that learning recovery, expanded learning, a plan is due to the Board of Education by June 1st. So that is not being rushed. There is an opportunity for us to, in addition to going through our LCAP engagement process, we will also be going through a process of developing a plan for learning recovery and expanded learning. That plan will come to the board by June 1st, and we will have those funds to spend all the way through August of 2022. You'll hear more about that, but tonight's focus when you hear from Ms. Takahashi and Renee Arcus will be on the second interim report, but we wanted you to have at least a bit of information about the deal that was reached this week to think about as we talk about our reopening. And so with that in mind, I'm going to pass to Dr. Brown, who's going to talk about the submission of required documents for reopening.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm proud to report that on Monday, March 1st, we submitted the 2 required documents that are a part of the guidance checklist to the Long Beach Health Department. The Long Beach Health Department, as our local health authority, is our approving agency. And so on Monday, we submitted a guidance checklist with a number of supporting documents that demonstrate our readiness for students and staff to return to in-person instruction, as well as the COVID-19 prevention program document, which has been compiled by our human resource department and reflects that we meet the standard necessary for employees to be physically in person on our campuses. So we will be awaiting approval from the health department of these documents, hopefully by the end of the week. Should we need to make any modifications to the documents that we've provided, we will do that, and we will do that with plenty of time to be able to resubmit, receive full approval from our colleagues at the health department. With that, one of the things that we have been proud of, specifically in the last couple of weeks, is the way that our elementary team has worked diligently to prepare a series of communications that will be shared with staff and parents. And so I'd like to pass to Brian Moskowitz, the Assistant Superintendent of Elementary Schools, who will share the work that his team has done in preparation for some of the specifics that we know staff and families are very interested in.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. And while I'm starting this, Mr. Ritson, if you could pull up the slides, that would be great. So if you'll recall, those of you who were participating in the board meeting last time, at our last board meeting, I did a more extensive update of the plans to reopen our elementary schools. Today, I really just want to give an update on the communication plan that we have, and then I'll hand it off to my colleague, Dr. Lund, so that he can talk a little bit more about the plans for middle school. And when we talk about elementary, I think it's important to reiterate that we're talking about our TK5 students at our elementary schools, our K-8 schools, and we're also talking about our students at our Buffum TLC program. So I know sometimes it's frustrating for parents, for those in the community, that sometimes from one board meeting to the next, it seems like maybe not a lot has changed. But I just want to stress that since the last board meeting, there has been so much work behind the scenes to put all of the details into place. Our schools are physically ready and have been physically ready to reopen. I've had the great opportunity, along with other principal supervisors in my office, to walk the campuses of our schools. We're physically walking with principals. We've had board members walk with us, you'll hear about in a bit. Our schools are ready. They have the PPE, they have the protocols in place, they have the signage, they are ready to open. What we know we need to do now is we need to continue to communicate with our stakeholders so that everybody feels comfortable with what those plans are. Over the last week, we had a great opportunity. I've had some wonderful dialogue with our representatives with Teachers Association of Long Beach, in really engaging with them around our plans. We have written some very detailed informational communication that will be going out this week. The reason there's a little bit of a shift that we're engaged in right now, and I think it's really important. While most of what is going out to our stakeholders this week comes from a district perspective that's grounded in the California Department of Public Health documents, that's grounded in our district reopening guidelines that are posted on our website, we also recognize that each of our schools is unique in their own way. The uniqueness may come from the number of students returning. It may come from the physical plant and how many entryways or exit points that a school may have. So there are some variations across our sites. And so we felt it was very important to hand off the communication to our principals. So on Tuesday, yesterday afternoon, all of our teachers and staff at all of our elementary and K-8 schools received some very detailed communication about things, and you can see a list here on the slide. Things like classroom schedules, classroom instruction and materials. We know there's been a lot of information just out in the public about what is allowable in a classroom. So just to be clear, in this communication with our teachers and staff yesterday, we pointed out, for example, that it is absolutely okay for a teacher to work one-on-one with a student in close proximity, but both should be wearing masks and it should be for a limited duration. But so that doesn't preclude a teacher from being able to go up and walk and stand next to a student's desk to support them. So all of this communication went out yesterday from our principals. Tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock, all of our parents, guardians, and families should expect to receive communication from your school principal at our elementary and K-8 schools for our TK5 students related to these topics. So again, classroom schedules, classroom instruction, materials. Parents should have a very good picture after receiving this communication of what it will look like in their child's classroom. Some additional items: arrival to and dismissal from school. We know that parents have a lot of questions about what will it look like? What will that screening process look like at my school? So you'll hear from our school principals about the entry gates, the exit gates, and where certain grade levels and certain students will be entering and exiting from. There'll be information in there about our cleaning protocols and how we will ensure how our custodians and custodial supervisors will ensure that our schools are clean, that are cleaned on a regular basis, and that there are safe environments for both students and staff. You'll also hear some communication about public access, how families, parents, and guardians can continue to access our school offices in a safe and orderly way. So I mentioned this week, we've had a great opportunity to be out at our sites, to work with our principals to see firsthand how our schools are prepared, and to also find out maybe where there might be some additional challenges. It's been just a great opportunity. Just want to point out in the next few weeks, there will be even more communication coming from principals. So I put a series of items here you can expect to see. If you're a parent of an elementary student, either at an elementary school or at a K-8 school, you should expect in the coming weeks to participate in site-led parent meetings where principals and teams at a site will engage with principals virtually. To engage with parents virtually to share even more detail around these items that will be in the written communication tomorrow. Our staff will be working with our principals, going through various levels of preparation, meetings, and trainings that will prepare each of our teachers and staff to be ready when students come on campus starting on the 29th. And so we also know there are other additional protocols, for example, around our testing that we will in the coming weeks be ready to share those specific details with our families. And a lot of that will flow through our school principals as they message, the variations that might be unique from one site to another. And you'll see I highlighted there specifically March 22nd through 26th. So that is the week that our teachers will be returning to their school classroom and teaching from the classroom. So during the week of the 22nd to the 26th, all of our students will continue to receive that distance learning virtual instruction that they've received up to this point. It will happen in the first part of the day. And in the afternoons, our teachers will have opportunities to prepare their classrooms, to engage in some site planning and preparation, to do some outreach to families, so that when students come back on the 29th, those who want to return, when they come back on the 29th, our schools, our teachers, our staff are fully prepared. But we think it's an exciting time. We know there have been a lot of questions that many of you out in the community want to know the specific details, and we understand that. And we think this week is a real pivotal time because you will be receiving that. So again, tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock, all of our parents and guardians of students in our elementary and K-8 schools, or TK5 students, will receive some very detailed communication from your school principal. The cover letter of that communication will list the parent meetings that will be upcoming. So you will be it'll be very clear when those will be coming so that you can participate if you so choose. And we will continue to do outreach in various ways, whether it's through US mail communication, through all the electronic means that we have, because we know it's really important to our parents and our families to be fully informed and engaged so that you are rest assured our schools are ready to reopen. So Dr. Baker, I don't know if we want to have our school board members maybe talk at this point before we hand off to Dr. Lund.
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you to you and your team, Brian, for just a phenomenal job of getting schools ready, and Chris Lund as well. Would love for our board members who were able to do a walk with the principal supervisors this week to share their observations, ask any questions, or share your concerns if you have them about what you saw out in school buildings this week. So I'll open up the floor to the board.
Mr. Otto, did you want to go first?
Sure. I had an opportunity. I mean, we've all been dying to have our schools reopened, and now that we see it on the horizon and coming in a very short period of time, we're particularly excited. It's been the goal that they be opened safely and as quickly as possible. But of course, there were criteria that we had to meet before we're allowed to do that. But now that we are at that threshold, we're moving full steam ahead. What I did at the request of Brian was to talk to the principal at Lowell Elementary School in the on Broadway at Nieto. And we met out there a couple of days ago with the principal of the school, Dow, and the idea was that we would go and look at what was being done to get the campus ready for the return of students. We took a tour. We looked at all the entrances and exits for various grade levels so that we could see whether students could easily and quickly get on and off campus in the morning and in the afternoon when they had to leave, and in a safe way so that they were socially distancing, wearing masks and whatnot. We looked at classrooms which were set up in a socially distanced way. One of the questions that I had before the visit was, so if you've got 30 students in your class, but only 15 can, or more or less 15 can be there, how are you going to do that? Well, of course, the answer to that is that you can have a morning session and an afternoon session. The classrooms were set up almost entirely socially distanced, limited number of desks, and yet all allowed the teacher the opportunity to work from a location that didn't compromise social distancing and gave her access to the technology that was available. In addition to the entry and exits that we had a chance to observe to see that would be able to function very, very well, we were able to inspect the care room where if a student who comes to campus, and all students have to answer the 4 or 5 questions about whether they have a temperature or whether they've been sick or all the rest of the questions as well. And then their temperature is taken. And if they don't pass, they're taken to the care room, which is really the auditorium. And we use the auditorium at Lowell because it's large and it's possible to socially distance, and students can be there until their parents or someone else has the ability to come and take them home. Lowell has many students both in the morning and the afternoon, and people have said, well, how do you keep the campus clean under those circumstances? Well, there's really almost constant cleaning going on in between the morning session and the afternoon session. Cleaning goes on as well. Brian has talked about the parents' meetings that are coming up, and we're trying to roll out all of this information to the parents so that they can see what it is that we're doing, what we're trying to do. And then there will be these site-led parent meetings in the next several weeks so that parents can ask their questions and find out. I felt very comfortable after going through this process and seeing all that had been accomplished this early, so that when we get to the point at the end of the month when schools are open, I'm sure we will be ready for the students that are returning. We also got to ask I got to ask lots of questions about how this was going to be done, whether students were excited about coming back. And, we've done surveying to see what the answers to those questions are. So we're going to know who's going to be there. I was very impressed with what had already been done. That's me.
Thank you. I'm trying to see if there's another board member that would like to go next.
I'm happy to.
Great.
So Mr. Otto talked a lot about the procedures that are in place, and about probably 95% of those procedures will be the same, my guess is, across the district, and there'll be some unique things around how campuses are set up, the size, entrances, so there'll be the variation there, as Mr. Moskowitz talked about. I really want to thank Ms. Madrigal, Ms. Robertson, the principal and assistant principal at Grant Elementary School in North Long Beach, where I visited this week, one of our biggest elementary schools in the district. The incredible care and thoughtfulness with which they are doing this work is incredible. And it was wonderful to witness not just the physical plans, but the heart that they have put into the work and the care that they have for their community and for their students. Ms. Madrigal has 100% response rate from her families about their decision to come back to the classroom or not. And she's done that through various mechanisms. She's done it through formal meetings. She's done it through the counselor reaching out and teachers reaching out and using every tool in her toolbox to get input from her families and her community about what they want as they return. But she also spoke to the work that she's done with her staff and with teachers, getting their ideas about how kids naturally move within the school. She is new to the school this year, so she may not understand that as well. So really bringing in the staff and teachers to help make some of those decisions that this is as safe as possible. They are excited and delighted to bring students back. There is an energy about the work of wanting to care deeply for their students and meet the needs of the students who return to campus, and to continue to meet the needs and support the students who will be learning from home still, and understanding that those two groups deserve and get the best of them. And so the intentional work that they're doing around continuing to educate students throughout the rest of the year, both on campus and still virtually, was pretty tremendous. And I just want to thank, I know that's one example. I got to go to one school. I would love to go to more, because I know the commitment to doing this in a way that is safe for students and families and staff. Everything from, Mr. Otto talked about the care room, if someone would need extra attention, or if someone maybe had a temperature that morning, to doing that in a place that is safe and protected, but outside as well, so that a student doesn't have to go into the building if they don't need to. Really coming up with plans A, B, C, and D to meet the safety and emotional needs of our students. So shout out to the elementary staff in the district office, but everyone on every site who's working hard. I took some pictures. I will post them on my social media later, of socially distanced desks and capacity signs on the outside, and gallon jugs of hand sanitizer outside every classroom, and sinks that have been brought into classrooms that didn't have sinks before. So it was wonderful to see all of that great work that Mr. Moskovitz talked about that's happened since decisions could be made, since it became okay to open classrooms. So thank you for the opportunity this week.
Thank you, Ms. Kerr. Dr. Benitez?
Yes, thank you, Brian. We heard the word equity used a lot today in our public comments. And I want to frame my comments and then a question for Brian and for Mr. Lund when he's able to give his the continuation of this update. Is, as Board Member Kerr just stated, now that we're allowed and able to open up schools, we are upholding our commitment to provide an option for those parents that are able to have their children, their students in person. And I say that because I want to highlight a couple things from my visit. And I'm so appreciative of all the effort, time, energy from every single one of our staff that's gone into not just developing a plan, but now operationalizing and implementing that plan. So just a couple highlights from my visit to Lincoln. Ms. Nemec was great there. One is, Brian, I think, I'm not sure if it was you or a combination of our conversation, highlighting the air filtration systems that we'll have in place, right? I know that was a concern from a lot of community members, from our staff, that every single one of our classrooms and any places on our campuses that we will have people present, there will be high capacity air filtration, either in those schools that already have them because of the new projects and new construction that we've had, but in those schools that don't, that we made an investment, all right, to purchase air filtration systems. So that really stood out for me, just as a highlight of the attention to details, as Board Member Kerr brought up. And I want to share two other thoughts, because I know that this is at the heart of what we want to do and what our principals are committed to doing. And we've been reiterating, but now we're here, right? But 3 weeks away. And it's the engagement with our communities. So we've been sharing, throughout the last almost 11 months now, how important it is to have our schools be the primary point of communication. And Principal Nemec really went above and beyond, sort of describing in my site visit, how important it is for those families around Lincoln, in those neighborhoods, to have ongoing communication. So I appreciate that we're all going to have these, and I suggested it, so I'm happy about it, that we're going to have these virtual meetings But I also want to highlight the importance of continuing that two-way communication, because many parents, many community members will have challenges to participating in those virtual meetings. And Principal Nemec highlighted that. She said, you know, we may not have, you know, we'll do everything we can to highlight, you know, participation at these meetings, but we may not have a lot of parents for all the reasons that we know that are challenging in our communities right now, be able to participate in these meetings. So thank you, Brian, for lifting up that we're going to send out every kind of communication, even if that means flyers and hard mail, because I think that's absolutely needed right now in terms of not just sending out information, but redirecting folks to, if for whatever reason they weren't able to participate at one of these meetings, if for whatever reason they're not accessing the information that's being sent out, to pick up the phone and call your school, right? And if you have students at different schools, call both of those schools. So Brian, if we could also talk about us sharing that information to parents, if we can just have a blast, an ongoing communication, like this is your school's contact information, this is your principal or your counselor or your leadership at the school for those families, parents, guardians, households that are unable to participate in our virtual meetings. The last thing I'll say, and actually let me ask a question first, but I'll say something after the question. We've had a lot of community conversations, and in my conversations in my community office hours, virtual office hours, around the decrease in synchronous or live instruction, right? And what the implications of, you know, right now us having, as an example, 3.5 hours of synchronous instruction at home, and that, you know, it's being reduced to 2.5 hours, and the challenges that come with families or for families on getting their students, you know, to campus, and then 2.5 hours later having to pick them up. And again, it was reflected in some of our comments in public comment. Just what does that mean? What does that look like? And sort of the rationale, right, for having that. So that's my question. But I want to say something after that. And I'll give Dr. Lunn and Mr. Moskowitz a chance to sort of address how that's going to work and why we're choosing those models. I started with this equity, right? That equity is being used a lot. We have funding, as Dr. Baker shared. We're eligible for funding, I should say, right? That's coming specifically because we are allowed to open, and we're following through on our commitment to provide that in-person opportunity. But I don't want us to lose sight, and it's sort of what we've been talking about this whole time, of those families, those students that for whatever reason are not able to be in person, that for whatever reason did not have an option to be in person. That doesn't mean that they didn't want to. That means that every family chose what they thought was best for their family, for their students. So although we have these additional funds coming, although we're using up all of our energy and resources to make sure that we have a solid, safe reopening up of schools starting March 29th, that we will have more than half of our students still at home. And many of those students are the most vulnerable students, all right? That through no fault of their own, just will not have the opportunity to be in person. So I'm thinking about those virtual classrooms where, you know, in some cases, half the class, in some cases, a third of the class will now be in person. And that may heighten the feeling of isolation that some of those students that stay online will continue to face, right? Because they'll be hearing about us returning to school. The chatter is about the reopening up of schools. Their friends may be in person, but some of our students won't have that choice. And it's either, you know, a combination of some of the challenges their households and families may be facing, or it just practically doesn't make sense for that family given that family's needs. So I want to really continue to uplift that we will have a critical mass of our students with the highest needs, many of them where virtual instruction hasn't worked the way we want it to work, that will be continuously facing that while we are, again, investing a lot of time and resources on the safe reopening plan. And so I think there's an opportunity there for us, even though, as Dr. Baker alluded to, that a big percentage of those funds are specifically to go to in-person, but that we also invest in those students, those families, those support mechanisms, whether it be social emotional support or tutoring or enrichment, that we will have still the majority of our students, particularly at the schools in my neighborhoods, that will not be in person. So having said that, Mr. Moskowitz, Dr. Lund, I'd love to hear sort of our thinking around the 2.5 hours and the hybrid, middle school option.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Benitez. We could probably spend a couple hours just kind of going into some of the detail of the things you shared. I think what you shared is really important. And I agree with a point in that we have spent a lot of airtime in board meetings talking about the reopening and the physically returning students to campus. I want it to be clear for everyone listening and all of our board members, we have not neglected those that will continue to be online. In fact, our teachers have really, in many ways, perfected the craft of teaching in a distance learning environment. Through experimentation and training and just perseverance, we know that our teachers are doing some great work in that online setting, and that will continue. And I also think it's important in this setting where we have some students in the morning and some students in the afternoon, whether it's in person and online, both in person. By nature of that, we are cutting the class size in half in many cases. And so we know that there's a lot of value in increasing the amount of time that a teacher spends with a student. And by reducing class size to maybe 13, 14, 15 students in a session, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, we think that our students, while it may be less time with the teacher, it will be a more effective, meaningful time, greater interaction, greater one-on-one opportunities to interact and communicate with the teacher. Something else that we're intentionally doing. So in that prior, let's say 3 hours of live teaching that we've had for most of this year, part of that time has included teacher librarians, music teachers, intervention teachers, all having access to that student. We're making a commitment that as much as we can, those teachers they provide a critical instructional opportunity for our students, whether it's the teacher librarian, the music teacher, the intervention teacher. We're going to prioritize that time outside of the core 2.5 hours between the teacher, the general education teacher, and the student. So we think by maximizing those opportunities and in the other times, the other asynchronous learning opportunities that a student would engage in, we'll be able to really maximize those 2.5 hours. So by maximizing the time, by decreasing the class sizes, we think that we hope and we plan for that will mitigate some of the less time with the teacher directly. We would love to have, all students all day, but the reality is with the social distancing requirements that are in place, even with us able to return students, we just physically can't have that on our campuses. So we think we've done what we can to mitigate a lot of those concerns, and we're prepared to move forward to do so even further. Last thing I would just like to point out, I agree that the needs of our students, all of our students, and particularly those who may not be connecting as much, may not be able to return for whatever reason. We continue to have Chromebooks available for any family who needs one. We continue to have Wi-Fi hotspots for any family who needs one. We are providing after-school tutoring and Saturday school at all of our, some variety of that at all of our Title I schools. We are, at the last board meeting, you as the board authorized to approve some contracts with some other intervention providers that our schools are now tapping into to provide those services to our students. So while it may, again, a lot of our time and our conversation is about getting our schools ready for in-person, I do want it to be clear to all of us here and all of us at home that we have not neglected those that will be continuing online. And in fact, because of the reduced numbers of students, it may even become a more effective experience. Dr. Lund, do you want to jump in from here?
Yeah, I think you did a great job summarizing what it would look like for students in both the in-person and the synchronous setting. So that small class size applies to the synchronous setting as well. And that can be overlooked, but just that afternoon session is with a smaller group for that more personalized attention.
Ms. Craighead, I think we didn't get your chance to share. I don't know if you want to share before Dr. Lund continues with middle school.
I was going to patiently wait until Dr. Lund was finished, and then I was going to step in. And I felt that being the chair, it was my prerogative to do that. But no, I'll go ahead before we moved on to discussing secondary things. First of all, I just want to thank you, Mr. Moskowitz. for inviting me to go on this tour. I had the opportunity to tour Riley, and the Riley principal, Mona Cook, was very gracious in hosting. And it was such an informative visit because not only did I see all of those safety protocols that have been put into place with the, the care room, the things that have already been discussed, but, separate entrances by grade level, directional arrows painted on the ground, letting kids know which direction to go, which way, that type of thing. And then also the issue of ventilation. We talked about that for classrooms that haven't been updated. I came away with the feeling of just great appreciation and gratitude for all the work that's gone into the preparations for this. I wasn't surprised because I know how hard everybody works and I know the kind of talent that we have. But to hear about the details and to hear about Mona Cook's intimacy with her role as a principal there, she's making sure that every single student at Riley Elementary, that their family has been contacted, that she has, spoken to or met with virtually regarding the return to school. She knows how many kids are going to be returning to each classroom. She knows how many of those kids have siblings at that school and will be dismissed at the same time. She's making allowances for the safest way on campus for the older sibling to meet up with the younger sibling. She's encouraging her families to walk to school to mitigate the vehicular traffic in front of the school. She's thought through so many of these little details that make it an easier experience, a more expedited experience, and a safer experience. I really have to, thank her for the good work that she's done there. Let's see, and I guess I just have a couple of questions maybe about how that would look from a teacher's point of view. If they have, let's say, for example, 14 or 15 kids in person in the morning, how is that teacher spending their afternoon?
Yeah, thank you. So for the vast majority of our teachers, they have both in-person students and online students. So most of our teachers in our district have both. So they would teach 2.5 hours in person, generally in the morning. Most are having in person in the morning, though some are in the afternoon. Part of that, they would have essentially about a 50-minute break after the morning students leave for their lunch and to prepare for that afternoon group. And then they would log on through Zoom and continue to provide that online instruction like they provided so far this year. One of the things that our teachers will also be providing for both groups is part of that 2.5 hours, let's say about 10 minutes, will be preparing students for the work that they will continue to do, the learning they will continue to engage in an asynchronous fashion. So when those in-person students leave at lunchtime, they will leave with the tasks that they need to complete at home as part of their asynchronous learning. The students who are with the teacher in the afternoon in a distance learning environment will have participated in the morning in those asynchronous learning opportunities that they would have heard about the day before. And then I know it's really important to our teachers. Many have reached out to us. They will continue to look for opportunities to keep classes connected in some way. It's not going to be full days. That's not expected, nor would that be a good instructional model at elementary. But to have opportunities for kids, maybe via a shared Google document, to still be connected to one another and to do some work, whether they're in the morning session or the afternoon. So our teachers I think it will be hard work. I don't think we should shy away from that. It will be hard work for our teachers to do both in person in the morning and online in the afternoon. But we think they have the experience of having been an online teacher at this point to be able to continue that for those students who may remain in the distance learning environment.
And then also, can you clarify if a teacher has a class of students in person, are they also teaching online at the same time?
They are not. At the elementary level, we don't have what sometimes is referred to as the concurrent model. So students, if they're in person, there will not be other students who are Zooming in for that lesson. Again, there could be opportunities where a teacher may connect students for a few minutes, a couple of times a week, just to keep the class connected and friends connected. But there will be no expectation at the elementary level that a teacher is teaching in person and teaching via Zoom at the same time.
Thank you. A couple of things I neglected to mention was that the teachers are going to be provided with microphones, which I was really delighted with that idea, because when you think about the teachers wearing a mask, the kids are wearing a mask, it might be hard for the kids to hear or understand what the teacher's saying. But for every teacher to be provided a microphone, that's going to help save their voices and the effort that goes into, raising a voice just to be heard or understood. So that was one of the little details that I was very happy to hear about. And then also I neglected to mention that the kids will not be eating in the classrooms. So when they're excused and they are eligible for the meals, they take those meals with them. So nobody's going to be eating in the classroom, meaning that everybody in the classroom will maintain that mask wearing and that extra layer of safety.
That's correct. And I think something, we pride ourselves on being a continuous improvement district. And so those headsets, the amplified headsets that you referenced, if you recall at the last board meeting, Dr. Lund shared our experience in collaborating with the principals and administrators from Garden Grove. And one of the things they shared with us at that time in early February was their experience in purchasing these amplified headsets and how that really helped their teachers. And then working with our health and safety committee and Yumi Takahashi and her team, they jumped right on it and have since purchased and ordered those for all of our teachers who don't already have an amplified system. Many of our teachers, all of our teachers in our recently renovated classrooms have the Extron system that allows for the amplification microphones already. But for those who may not be in a classroom that has that, we have purchased the headsets that teachers can wear to amplify their voices so they don't have to strain their voice with the mask on.
And that sounds like a quick turnaround.
We try to be nimble where we can be. So Ron Hoppy and his team in purchasing have done some great work this year and just making sure everything our schools need, they get it as quickly as we can.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And so Dr. Lund, I think we'll go to you next.
All right. First, let me thank Mr. Moskowitz and his team, our elementary and K-8 principals, staff, teachers, counselors. The opening or the preparation for the opening at the elementary level has really been a team effort. And it's just really fantastic to see our elementary team paving the way for our middle and high schools and the pending reopening 3 weeks later for our middle and high schools. So the communication that Mr. Moskowitz was alluding to at the middle school level, we are finalizing that formal communication that will also be shared with parents and staff. Our principals this week at both the middle and K-8 level are meeting with parents to go over the models at the middle school level so that parents can make an informed decision regarding those models. So our survey window is currently open until next Friday. We've had an amazing turnout already. Over 5,000 of our middle school parents have already completed the survey, roughly 30% in the first 2 days, indicating their preference for a particular model, either confirming their preference from their original choice or making a change to that selection. We do have an earlier deadline for our students receiving transportation. That's in order to give us the full 6 weeks to set up that transportation prior to the start of school. And we've heard from 75% of those parents. So we'll finalize our communication this week by reaching out to those parents to confirm their selection so that that transportation can be set up for that first week of school. Our teachers, as you know, are returning on April 12th, and additional time will be built into that week. More information forthcoming on that to assist teachers in getting their classrooms prepared for our reopening and welcoming of students the following week. Obviously, that is predicated upon our red tier designation, which we are very close to now. So assuming we are still in that state or lower even at our reopening, we'd be prepared to then welcome our students back on April 20th. So at the middle school level, there are 3 options for our parents. We have an in-person hybrid option, which I'll go into the details on. We have an all virtual option for our parents that don't feel safe sending their students back to school or have other reasons that they couldn't manage the schedule based on the way it's outlined. And then we also have our independent study option. And this is an option that we are also making, allowing our current APEX students, our current independent study students, to continue in that program. So let me go into our in-person option. Within our in-person hybrid option, every Monday is a synchronous day. So our students are going to stay online, whether they are in the in-person or in the all virtual option. So this is something that's actually built into the middle school model in terms of keeping the classrooms together weekly. So all students will stay together every Monday in a synchronous environment. This also gives us another day of instruction. So Mondays obviously would be a full day of instruction for our students in the online environment, followed by an alternating in-person and asynchronous day. So the in-person days, either a Tuesday, Thursday as a group A or a Wednesday, Friday as a group B, will be a full day of learning. So unlike the elementary level where it's a half day, the middle school model is a full day of learning, rotating through all 6, or in some cases 7, of their class periods. This does include lunch. So this is one change also from the elementary model. So instead of students obviously taking their lunch home after that morning session at the elementary level, our middle school students will eat on campus. So the question is, well, how is that going to be managed? So first, let me break down just generally how many students we're talking about. I'll take a large school like Stanford. Stanford has roughly 1,300 students. So normally you would have a lunch schedule that would have, well, currently Stanford had 2 lunches last year. So one of them included 2 grade levels, so almost 900 students at lunch at one time. In our online environment, in our in-person environment, Stanford will service half their students at most. Currently, roughly 72% of Stanford families have indicated that they would be returning. So when breaking down those numbers, you'll be looking at 72% of their current enrollment, which is about 940 students. Those students be broken into Group A and Group B, so roughly half of that, so roughly 450 students per group. And then Stanford also has a 3 lunch schedule scheduled for our in-person return. So you'd have roughly 150 students eating lunch at one time. For a yard, that normally would have had 900 students on it. So picture students going to the cafeteria in a grab and go fashion and taking that lunch out to the yard, socially distancing, and having lunch on that yard. So really, obviously with supervision, making sure that students are maintaining that social distancing, we can really assure a safe lunch schedule with the minimum amount of students that are actually going to be participating at each lunch period. The 2 additional days will be asynchronous lessons, and the asynchronous lessons, it will build on either the prior lessons that the students have experienced or support them in subsequent lessons. There is a possibility of those lessons also building on prior instruction that has occurred throughout the year as a way of, reteaching, practicing some of those key lessons, key standards that students have already been taught throughout the year. The in-person session obviously includes the social distancing requirements in the classroom as well. So it includes 15, 16 students per classroom, socially distanced, wearing masks in the classroom. We do anticipate that, just as Mr. Moskovitz had referenced, that some of those same in-person effective strategies occur with our students returning. So we anticipate that with this small class size, that students get more individualized attention. We would anticipate teachers circulating around the space. We would anticipate that, just as Mr. Moskowitz alluded to, that teachers could work one-on-one for limited duration with students to really provide that more personal instruction in this small class size. Normally, our middle schools have a fairly large class size of 35 to 37 students. So with this in-person setting of roughly 16 students, it is our hope that our students receive that more personalized attention to their learning in this in-person environment. So here you see a breakdown of what that might look like for the week. So Group A and Group B, parents will be notified which group their students are in either during or before the week of April 12th, so prior to our start of school. So on that Monday, you see the synchronous day where both groups are together, and then that alternating Tuesday, Wednesday schedule. So our students would have in-person on Tuesday with an asynchronous day Wednesday, returning in person on Thursday, and an asynchronous day on Friday. And then for our Group B, asynchronous on Tuesday, followed by in-person, asynchronous in-person. The communication on Monday will be really important as to what teachers communicate to students on what they're doing the subsequent days. So I can imagine on Monday, a teacher telling the Group A students tomorrow will be in person and we'll be addressing the following. For our Group B students, you'll be working on this particular lesson, either something that we reviewed today, Monday, or something that was a review of a prior learning, and then in preparation for our work together on Wednesday. So that Monday sort of setup of the week, really to assure that over the 5 days of learning, students know exactly what's expected across that week. The next slide outlines our virtual schedule. Our virtual schedule includes 3 days of synchronous learning. So similar to the in-person, where you had 1 day and 2 in person. In this case, it's 3 days of synchronous Zoom learning from home, followed by 2 asynchronous days, similar to the in-person learning. The next slide shows really what that looks like. Once again, those students stay together in a synchronous environment on Monday. And then likewise, that similar communication outlining tomorrow, I'll be Zooming with this group, whereas this group would have asynchronous work to complete. There is a possibility within this model, if a teacher has a full virtual section, that the teacher could continue 5 days of synchronous learning. But we are keeping it flexible to allow for students to not have to change schedules. So part of that flexibility of really keeping the same schedule and the same teachers is outlining this virtual schedule whereby asynchronous days are interspersed with these two groups. So we'll have a better understanding after we've received all the survey information to know the implication for our schedules. At the elementary level, we had very few students that really even had to consider a different class environment depending on their selection. So I know at our K-8 schools, we have 4,400 students in K-8. Over 99% of them stayed with their teacher, where we didn't even have to consider an alternate placement. So it is our hope that we do the best job possible of keeping students with their current schedule and current teachers, while recognizing that a middle school schedule is far more complex than an elementary schedule. An elementary schedule includes 1 teacher. A middle school schedule includes 6 teachers. And obviously not all those classrooms are the same for every student. Students have different electives that they've chosen, which then can limit the selections or possibilities within that environment. So all I can say to that is we're going to make our best effort to do whatever we can to make sure that our students have a consistent schedule with the same teachers. Our counselors have done an amazing job of building out classrooms, building out schedules with the original preference in mind, so that based on that preference, entire sections were built out as all in-person sections or all virtual sections. And then depending on what parents choose, we'll see what we can do to accommodate those requests. In some cases, if a student does need to change schedules, can we keep them with the same teacher? What are those possibilities? And we won't know that until after we have the final selection or the final request from parents after our closing of the survey next Friday. Our APEX students will obviously have an opportunity to stay within APEX if they choose. So we have 479 students currently in our APEX program. Some of those parents may choose to continue to have their children participate in APEX, whereas some others might choose to actually have their students return to in-person learning. If they choose to return to in-person learning, obviously a new schedule will have to be built out for those select students. But there is the option for students to continue in that model. Finally, this is a sample teacher schedule. So what would the experience be like for a teacher across their periods? In this particular teacher's classroom, fifth period is their conference period. So you can see across fifth period that maintains consistent. We can see in periods 1 and 4, we basically have an in-person section. So imagine in this particular classroom, students in period 1 will meet virtually on Monday. On Tuesday, half the group will be there in person, similar to the elementary, where half the students would be in the AM. And then group B would be in person on Wednesday. So imagine 16 students on Tuesday, 16 students on Wednesday, alternating throughout that period. Obviously, all students will participate synchronously on that Monday. So once again, all students would see each other online on that Monday, also giving school sites an additional day for some deep cleaning on site because there won't be any students on site on Mondays. For periods 2, I'm sorry, if you can go back, for periods 2 and for period 6, you do see a blended section here. So imagine that we have some students that have requested to come back in person in this section. And let's say, for example, that 10 students in this class of 35 have chosen to come back. So teacher meets with those students on Monday, all virtually. On Tuesday, those 10 students would come and have in-person learning. On Wednesday, the teacher would teach the other 25 students synchronously. On Thursday, the 10 again in person. On Friday, the 25 synchronously. So you can see how that might look across periods 2 and period 6. Period 3 is the all synchronous sort of setting, whereby in this particular case, we've built this out as an A or B. If the teacher chose to keep the students synchronously for the entire week, that could be an option. But this was set up this way just in case some of those students choose to come back in person. With this AB schedule, it allows for that flexibility to not have to change a schedule, to not have to change a teacher. So once again, we'll know the details that when we get to that point. But in this particular setting, as designed, you would have a synchronous day on Monday, synchronous with a small group on Tuesday, synchronous with a small group on Wednesday, and then alternating for Thursday, Friday. So that's essentially what the teacher schedule might look like across their sections. That is obviously dependent upon what a teacher actually teaches within those sections. Some of our teachers have a pure schedule where they teach the exact same course every period of the day. Some teachers have an elective that might be added in there as an additional prep for that particular course. So there are some variations based on the specific courses that teachers are teaching. Once again, that's just a reflection of the complexity of a middle school schedule. All right, so I've shared a lot of information. What questions do you have about our in-person model, our synchronous all virtual model, APEX, or what a teacher might experience? Dr. Benitez?
Dr. Lund, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to have to let that sink in for a little bit and review those slides. So I think just again, re-emphasizing the details, right, and the complexity. I'm going to pose a different kind of question for you, Dr. Lund, and love to hear from Mr. Moskowitz too. So obviously a lot, again, of time and effort went into the details of exploring what are the best options, right, given the limitations that we have, both from a public health perspective, but also from a logistical perspective. Can you talk a little bit about, because I know you've done your due diligence and you explored all the possible models, the downside or some of the challenges of having some concurrent instruction occur, right? So instead of, or not necessarily instead of, but as another option of going back and forth, some days yes, some days no, some part of the day synchronous, some part of the day asynchronous. just to elaborate a little bit about what are some of the challenges and or things that you considered that just didn't make a concurrent model the best option at this time. And for folks that are listening or watching, concurrent model meaning, as an example, that a teacher would be teaching in person from their classroom with in-person students, and that whether it's one or two cameras in the classroom, that the virtual students would also be participating in that classroom setting. So anything you could share about that, Dr. Lund, given all of the effort and details that went into this hybrid model?
First of all, let me just say that the differences across level really predicate the models that we considered. The needs of younger children at the elementary level versus the middle grades versus high school. Another key part of this was the schedules that we're following. So the high school level, for example, has a block schedule. So a lot of their planning had to accommodate a block schedule and what that would look like. At the middle school level, we essentially, in almost all of our schools, had a 6-period schedule. So it was really, how do we replicate a 6-period schedule in an in-person model, or in this case, a hybrid model? The biggest, I would say the biggest impact of the model chosen is really around safety. Safety really dictates what we could do within school, given our different models. So in order to socially distance students in classrooms with 16 students on average in a classroom, we needed to go to a hybrid model. That was really a key part of our discussion. We considered 14 other models. You might remember that from last summer. I mean, we really did our due diligence around brainstorming a whole bunch of different options. We landed on this particular model as a blend of one giving 3 full days of instruction every week, one in an online environment, in a synchronous environment, and 2 in the in-person environment. That was done to really assure at least 3 full days of instruction across the week. In addition, the synchronous Monday was really done to really continue that possibility of closure and reopening. That's probably less of an issue now because our teachers have become so proficient at synchronous instruction, but originally it was part of that design. In this case, it does keep the classroom together. So it does give an opportunity to have the entire class together for communication purposes, for classroom community purposes, relationships within that online environment. So regardless of the program that a parent chose, their students would stay in that same class on Monday together as a group to build on the relationships that have already been established. In terms of why, so like the concurrent question then. So I'm hesitant just because it's a complex question to ask. We looked at how we could really maximize that in-person experience for students and really sort of balancing what a teacher would have to go through, given the different courses that they're teaching and given the fact that they're not on a block. I think that's an important piece here, that they're on a 6-period schedule. So it's a little bit different than high school where you have just 3 courses that you're managing throughout the day. Our teachers are managing 6 or 7 classes. And the concurrent model just created some challenges as it relates to the attention that students would receive that are coming back in person. And how do you really maximize that instructional practice of circulating the classroom, providing one-on-one attention, really maximizing what can occur with 16 students in a room. For the first time ever in many cases, our students have not had that experience at the middle school level with only 16 students. So it was really striking that balance between the two. When I look at what our schedule is going to dictate and how we can maximize or minimize the number of students that are going to have to change schedules is really what we're going to have to look at when we get down that line, is to see what options we'll need to consider in the end. Do we look to any concurrent model for the select classrooms that perhaps want it? I've had teachers request it. So in those unique circumstances, do we consider that? I really wanted to base our numbers, I'm a data person, on what the actual numbers of requests were and where our schedules landed when we got to that point. So we've got a couple of options we can consider for parents that want to change schedules. Do we offer an Apex for the last 8 weeks for those that want it? Do we change a schedule? And can we change a schedule? Could we swap out a schedule for a student that was in person that now wants virtual, for one that was virtual that now wants in person? Can we do so in keeping the same teachers? So all those sort of considerations when the time comes to actually put those classes together, put those schedules together, really starting the week of March 15th.
Chris, if I can jump in, I think at the elementary level, Dr. Benitez, I think what you said, Chris, is really important, that there's a developmental ability of students at different levels to be able to attend in different ways. So imagine a first grade student who's at home, zooming in while the teacher is providing direct instruction in the classroom. We hope that our first grade teachers are like they do in a first grade classroom, that they're up and they're moving around, that they're working with individual students, they're calling on students all around the room. And what is the ability of a first grade student at home to attend to that teacher who's not going to be tethered to the computer, but is going to be around on the whiteboard and at different locations, is calling on students at the back of the room that the student at home may not really be able to hear to. And while the teacher is working with all these students out in the classroom, how are they engaging the students that are on the computer? How are they keeping them engaged, keeping them on task, keeping them focused on the lesson? It just isn't really a model at the elementary level. While some parents may like the idea of a full day in time, the reality is it wouldn't be quality, and it wouldn't allow for our teachers to really provide the individualized instruction that we like to see in our elementary classroom. So I do think a lot of it is the developmental ability of students. We think that while it may be less time, that it's going to be more effective time, more focused time for both the students and for the teacher to be able to attend to that. At older levels, in middle, in high school, in college, you could probably do those kinds of things because the students are more mature and they can manage themselves more. But the reality, when we went through our focus groups in the summer with teachers and parents, it just wasn't a feasible model at the elementary level.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Dr. Lund. And I'm coming at it in the spirit of, again, given the complexity of the middle school model, I'm thinking of how a Spanish-speaking or a Khmer-speaking or a Tagalog-speaking parent at Franklin, right? And given that we have the survey out, right, that we're looking at responses by March 12th, just what information they may or may not have to be able to base their decision on which model, right? So again, just, I would hope that there's 10,000 people watching the school board meeting tonight. There probably aren't, but I'm hopeful. And again, that what information is out there, I think becomes pivotal for what options parents, what decision parents are going to make given the details.
Yeah, and I guess my hope would be that for our parents that are comfortable sending their students back to school, that they know that we're doing everything possible to assure their student safety. We didn't get to go into some of the elaborate aspects around a middle school schedule and rotating, the one directional hallways that we're setting up, the cleaning that a teacher might do or between, not required to do, but if they wanted, some of the other antimicrobial sort of, surface protections that we're setting into place. Like I said, some of those lunch considerations that I discussed that really reassure, I hope, parents that we're taking all the precautions necessary for their students to return safely for those that are comfortable doing so. The other piece that we didn't allude to is really around SEL and the small class size and the attention to students in front of you builds on supporting students' SEL. And I would say that would probably be one of the other added challenges given our age group of a concurrent setting, of really being able to dedicate time to that SEL aspect, to the small group that I'm really attending to for an 11-year-old.
Thank you. Oh, Ms. Kerr.
Yes, and just a quick question, Dr. Lund, I saw in your presentation, I know it's similar for probably elementary school as well, but you noted that there is a deadline for students with IEPs that comes before the general deadline. So some of the things that people are concerned about is making sure that students who have IEPs and who need access to being in person are being given the opportunity to be in person. So if you could just speak to that work a little bit would be helpful.
Yeah, and just to clarify, it's really just our students with IEPs that receive transportation. So our other students that have IEPs that don't receive transportation have until March 12th. So what we did is prior to even our survey opening, we reached out to every parent, made a first attempt in our office. So prior to even releasing this to the school sites, we had already heard from 150 of the 301 parents. Since Wednesday, or since Monday, I should say, we've heard from an additional, 83 of them. So we have roughly 70 or so parents left that we need to hear from. And our school sites are making those contacts. We will do some continual outreach. Our our Office of Student Support Services is also doing outreach. So it's really just, once again, it's all in one-on-one conversations to really go through all the questions that our students with IEPs who receive transportation might have about the model, but also about transportation in particular. So what would that look like for our students that are medically fragile versus our students that are not medically fragile?
Thank you.
Okay, did anybody have any other questions, or Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. I appreciate you breaking down the number of schedule types, the asynchronous to synchronous, and I'm just going to be just transparent with you. As we look at those from a space of folks that are highly educated in this Zoom room, I guess you can call it, I don't know if it has the same clarity for those that have translation issues, or folks that are not as attuned to educational spaces. And so though I do think that the information is there, I think that we can definitely make sure that it's clear in regards to when we do open these middle schools, to making sure that folks like from my Washington neighborhood community can truly understand the hybrid model. I do recognize all of the levels of detail that we put into this. And even as a college educated man, I looked at that thing and said to myself, whoa, it was overwhelming to say the least. And so I think I've always been a firm believer in, when it comes to information, let's make it plain. And so I think that the information's there, but I think that it's important to make it simple. So I know that we'll get there when the time's right, but I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. I mean, the simplest explanation is, if you're in person, you're 2 days a week. You are 2 days a week in person. And if you're all virtual, you're 5 days a week 5 days at home. So, I mean, that's the simple answer. If you want to come back, you're coming back 2 days a week. If you don't want to come back, you're at home 5 days a week, or 5 days a week. So that's the easiest way I can explain it.
Okay.
Dr. Lund, you should have just said that at the beginning of your presentation on one slide. No, I'm being facetious, because the details are necessary, right, to provide context on what scenarios are available. But I think if we had a slide that just sort of illustrated that could be translated into multiple languages, that would be helpful.
And Dr. Lund, I think I saw a schedule that you put out of all of the schools that'll be doing information meetings over the next week. Some schools are doing multiple. So again, we're going back to that idea of looking to your principal and to your school site to get more specific information to help walk parents through the decision of what they want to do at this time. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, so you should find that there's communication that's already gone out on that. So many of our schools hosted information nights on Monday night and last night, and are doing so tonight. So there'll be multiple sessions, especially in larger schools.
Dr. Lund, understanding, again, I was being facetious with my previous comment. I think one thing that would help to Eric's point, and what I agree with, is if we could see the schedule from the perspective of a student rather than the teacher, right? So from a student's perspective, what would my day look like? I think might anchor our conversations with our community members, or might help at least.
Right. Yeah. So that slide 7 is really an attempt to do that, but it's really Monday, I'm Zooming. Tuesday, I'm in person. Wednesday, I'm at home and I'm not Zooming. I'm doing work that the teacher gave me. Thursday, I'm back in person. Friday, I'm doing work again. So I guess that simple breakdown as best as possible. Now, there's a complexity there of what group you're in, but
that's it.
Yeah, one day a week, one day of that week, I'm Zooming. The other 2 days, I'm in person, and the other 2 days, I'm doing work independently.
You made it plain to me, brother. Thank you.
So, Dr. Lund, is this information available online in case somebody would like to reference that?
Yeah, it's on our reopening plan. There's a description there. There was also a description that was sent to all of our parents this weekend that kind of gave a brief overview with the visual graphic of what the model entails. So that's been shared in English and Spanish already. And I believe the reopening is also in Khmer.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Okay, so with no objection, we will take a 10-minute break. Or Dr. Brown, did you have something to say? Or I noticed you're unmuted, so.
Oh, no, I just gave a thumbs up to the idea of a 10-minute break. Thank you.
Okay. Then we will reconvene at, what time is it? 7:51. Thank you, everybody. Welcome back from the break, everybody. We will resume with business items, and we'll start with personnel. Mr. Miller.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. So I present the following proposed actions prepared by the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resource Services, approved and recommended by the Superintendent. First, I'll start with the classified and exempt personnel. Appointments, 29. Leaves of absence, 6. Resignations, 4. Retirements, 1. In regards to certificated personnel, appointments, 5. In-service changes, 22. Leaves of absence, 7. Resignations, 6. Retirements, 8. And amendments, 1. That's the Human Resources report.
I move to approve, and Mr. Miller, it's almost 8 o'clock at night. The afternoon came and went for us.
Touche, my friend.
Did somebody second that?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, Dr. Benitez?
Aye.
Ms. Kerr?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Otto?
Aye.
And I vote aye. So hearing no opposed and no abstentions, that passes 5-0. Board authorizations.
Move approval.
Second.
Discussion?
Yes, I'd like to talk a little bit about this as when I had my meeting with David. So in regards to this board authorization, we're talking about teachers that have only 12 to 18 units towards a certain subject. And I'm curious if we can get some statistics on the quality of, I guess you can call it education for the students that are in classes with a teacher who only has 12 to 18 units of knowledge towards a certain subject in contrast to those that have gotten their a degree or credential in this exact subject. So I would like to see if there's a way that we can, at minimum, review the quality of education that those students may or may not be receiving.
Would somebody like to address that, or?
So I'd be happy to
Go ahead.
I'd be happy to respond to that, just to maybe give some additional context. I believe that the question was, and let me just make sure everyone knows that a teacher who receives a board authorization is a fully credentialed teacher. And so a teacher who is fully credentialed, the Ed Code does allow them to teach in another subject area. Sometimes that might be an elective, sometimes that might be another area. And in order for us to approve those board authorizations, at the middle school level, a teacher must have at least 12 units, and at the high school level, a teacher must have at least 18 units. And so the question was, has there been any comparison data? And that's something that we can certainly look into. But I just want to share that when it comes to ensuring quality instruction and quality education, it doesn't come from just necessarily your preparation. Ensuring quality instruction has to do with site supervisors who provide coaching. It has to do with what's called the California Standards for the Teaching Profession. And that outlines 6 different competency areas, if you will, that our supervisors support teachers in. But to answer the question directly, has there been a comparison study? No, there hasn't, and that's something that we can certainly look into. I just wanted to give some greater context, and I'm not sure if my colleagues or peers would also like to share something as it relates to quality.
David, I think you provided a really good context. It would be very difficult to make that comparison. And I think the significance of a fully credentialed teacher with additional units paints a really good picture, along with the standards that teacher is held to.
Got it. And I'm sorry if it came across as if I was discrediting credentialed teachers. My question is more about the quality of the product to a certain extent. What do I mean by that? Is if it was a teacher who's attended 60 units or 36 units in a certain subject, are we recognizing that those teachers and the students that they oversee are scoring higher on their test or have higher grades towards that subject? And so I think that an analysis towards this to see if there is no separation between the two and there's too many variables to try and figure that out, I'd just be curious to see if we can do a full analysis on this.
So I'll add to that, Mr. Miller, that we also don't evaluate teachers in the way that you're making a request about comparing teachers. And so it's something we can talk about what would inform you in the way that you're requesting, but it's probably not something that we can do in the way that you're thinking about it right now, but something we can continue to talk through what would help in terms of your understanding.
Appreciate that.
Dr. Benitez?
Yeah, I think Mr. Miller's question got me thinking more about it. I think another aspect here, Dr. Baker, is having a high quality curriculum, all right, to either reinforce best practice pedagogy and or support in ways that the instructor alone, right, doesn't carry the burden of having to figure it out. I'm not sure if you're going to include this in your report, Dr. Baker, but I think I saw something on social media about us doing an equity curriculum audit. If you could touch on that, right, because I think it goes hand to hand with some of the questions Mr. Miller's raising about quality of instruction. And so I think curriculum is a big component of that as well.
Great. So what I will do is Dr. Kale will be providing a report at the board workshop in March on the curriculum audit. So much more to come on that. I also just want to share that teachers that are board authorized, what this also doesn't tell you is about all of the professional learning and support they get within the district. So this just tells you about college coursework. Most of these teachers will also have professional development with their department, with district curriculum leaders, and with others. And so there's a lot that's not stated just in the aspect of being a board authorized teacher.
Okay, with no further discussion, all in favor, Dr. Benitez,
Aye.
Ms. Kern,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Otto,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So hearing no opposed or no abstentions, that passes 5-0. Coaching assignment.
Move approval.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, Dr. Benitez,
Aye.
Ms. Kerr,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Otto,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Hearing no opposed or no abstentions, that passes 5-0. Instruction report.
I move to approve.
Second.
Discussion?
Sure. I just wanted to point out in the instruction report, and Dr. Kale can add if she'd like, we are finishing up our textbook adoption. So this is the last of our new science textbook adoption to meet the next generation science standards. So this is the elementary work that went through the full textbook adoption process, including giving the public an opportunity to review and have a say. So kudos to the teams who have done that and those who volunteered their time over the last couple of years to ensure that we have high quality textbooks in science.
And I would make the comment too that in the reviewing of this information, I learned a lot as a pretty new board member, and that includes that these school plans for student achievement are incredibly detailed processes that we go through with the school site councils, working real hard here. They base it on student needs, assessment data, use of staff, parent involvement, and allocation of resources. And it takes a while to get these things done, but then I think the schools own these, and then it gives them an opportunity to really say, this is our plan. We got to make sure that our students go through this. I was particularly interested in the articulation agreement between principles of hospitality and tourism and geography for tourism, which is with Long Beach City College. And, we're doing this over at the people that I bought the car from.
At Browning High School.
They're on Browning High School, yeah. And they live across the street from me. I'm very interested in Avalon and what goes on in Catalina, and what goes on there is a lot of hospitality stuff and tourism stuff, and this helps give that population the possibilities of a leg up. They've been trying to do this stuff for a while, and I'm glad to see that this agreement is going through. And so just to give a little more information about these instructional items, but I'm all in favor of what the recommendation is.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor, Dr. Benitez,
Aye.
Ms. Kerr,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Otto,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So hearing no opposed or abstentions, that passes 5-0. Finance report A.
Move approval.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, Dr. Benitez,
Excuse me, aye.
Ms. Kerr,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Otto,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So hearing no opposed or abstentions, that passes 5-0. Finance report B.
Move approval.
Second.
Discussion?
Yes, Madam Chair, I recuse myself from participation in Finance Report B on the consent calendar. I have a potential financial interest under Government Code 1091 and 87100. My husband works for a subcontractor who has done work for the payees.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Dr. Benitez,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Otto,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So hearing no opposed but one abstention, that passes 4-0 with one abstention. Business Department report.
Move approval.
Second.
Discussion.
These are the gifts that we're getting from the public, and it's always with a great deal of gratitude that we look and see what's being given us that we can use to the district to help educate our students.
Might be a good plug for our Long Beach Education Foundation right now, Mr. Otto. If anyone wants to donate, give, we have an arm in our district to be able to receive those gifts and donations and be able to get them to our students.
Yeah, point well taken.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor, Dr. Benitez,
Aye.
Ms. Kurt,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Otto,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So hearing no opposed or abstentions, that passes 5-0. Purchasing and contract report.
Move approval.
Second.
Discussion.
Yes, Madam Chair. There are a couple of items here I think that align well with our conversation around our reopening schools in-person plan. Namely, that we noticed that our vaccine costs, our testing costs are included here. It'd be great if we could speak a little bit to that and sort of what our, kind of in two areas. One is from a fiscal perspective, what that looks like, and secondly, sort of how that aligns with our plan that we have.
I mean,
Susan Ginder, who's our project manager for our testing program, can speak to the fiscal aspect of these two contracts, testing program.
Yes, thank you for asking. Like you mentioned, we are bringing two contracts to board with two different vendors. We are working already with one of them, trying to get our high school contact sports ready to be tested. They'll start testing tomorrow. That will be very exciting. And we have roughly 1,000 students that will be tested, students and staff for those sports. That is football and water polo. So the cost for that will run about $55,000 a cycle. And that will all depend on when we get in good enough tier with the county that we can end that process. But until we do, it's roughly $55,000. Then the elementary that will be returning is roughly 16,000 tests. And it's going to run about $300,000 to $350,000 a cycle for that. We will be reimbursed by Medi-Cal. It's not actually a reimbursement. The vendor will be billing Medi-Cal, but we don't have a way to determine how much that will be. So we're saying that the cost will be somewhere between $300,000 and $350,000 a cycle for that. And very exciting today, the vendor that we will be primarily using just gave us a huge price decrease, which is why we've changed the board item. And it's the Valencia Branch Laboratory, and it was set up by the state to help school districts deal with this issue. And they are now getting enough volume that they have economies of scale. Their test cost will now be $21 per test. So is there any more that I should add at this point, or does that help give you some background?
I think that's good information. Can you tell us what a cycle is, or?
Okay, when I refer to a cycle, if we were to test 16,000 elementary students each week, that would be the $300,000 to $350,000. If we're in a tier where we can only do it, where we're only required once every 2 weeks, then that's what I mean by a cycle.
Okay.
So the less cycles, the less cost.
Right,
The more
right.
cycles, the more cost. But it depends on which tier we're in, and then also what we decide as a district to do to provide for the safety of our students.
Right. So the cycles vary in
Yes.
in length. Okay.
But I will tell you on the sports cycle, as long as we're testing, it is weekly. They're required to test them weekly.
Right. And a major part, in my opinion, of going back to school, which is the main topic of this meeting tonight, is going back to athletics as well. And this is the beginning of that return to normalcy as well. And in order to do that, we are required to do this kind of testing, or in fact, weekly testing. And yet I had several telephone calls today from people that I know who were so excited that this felt like school was beginning again, because these things were going to be made available. And so it was moving to have people say, finally, we're going to have football and cross country, water polo back as well, because it's an intimate part of what we.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
And
Yes.
I just wanted to acknowledge what you talked about, Susan, was that this really is about student safety. And so we had some folks who are commenting that because it's not required, we don't need to do it. We shouldn't have to do it. And I think for me, this speaks to that our community is experiencing COVID differently in different parts of the city, different zip codes. And for some, they may feel it unnecessary because their experience has been that COVID isn't as intense. But we know for some communities that have been incredibly hard hit, including our Black and Brown communities and our lower income communities, that safety is at the forefront of everyone's mind. And this is a step that we can take to make sure that we are aware that the pandemic is more intense in different parts of the city. And this is the care we will take of our family and community.
Thank you. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor, Dr. Benitez?
Aye.
Ms. Kerr?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Otto?
Aye.
And I vote aye. So hearing no one opposed or any abstentions, that passes 5-0. Now we are at superintendent's items where we have none. Unfinished business, we have none. New business, second interim financial report for 2020-2021. And I believe we have Renee Marcus to speak on that.
I'll introduce the item.
Okay.
So we're happy to present the second interim financial report. It's our second required financial report of the year. And it's an analysis of revenues and expenditures through January 31st. The board is required to certify whether the district can meet its financial obligations for this year and for the 2 subsequent years, and we are recommending a positive certification. So I'm very happy to introduce Renee Arcus, who will provide a summary of the report for you tonight.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to provide some information regarding the second interim report. So I'm making sure it comes up on the screen. Give it one moment. And when we're ready, we can go to the next slide.
Sorry, Ms. Arcus, we're having issues with the full screen, so it's going to look like this. Can you all see it?
Yes.
Okay.
No problem. Thank you very much. So we'll start with a little bit of an overview. Slide 2. Thank you. So we have some news regarding the second interim, and a lot of this change comes from the governor's January budget. So in January of each year, the governor will release a budget projection for the next year. And the revenue picture that the governor provided in his January budget has provided us with a better picture than we reported in our first interim. So a reminder to everyone, these are proposals only. So we're gonna watch in May, we will get a May revise on our budget, and then we will move forward with adopting a budget. And sometime late in June, we actually receive the final state budget. And at that time, we can make changes to our budget sometime in August. So right now, these new projections are looking better, and they're mostly through the governor's January budget. In addition, the district itself has been able to improve our unduplicated student counts. I'll talk a little bit about that later, but we've talked about this at several board meetings regarding the student reporting that we have been actively asking sites to help on. And our increase in unduplicated pupil students was from 63 to 67%. And you will see a market increase in our revenue in the current year for that purpose. Our expenses remain mostly in line with first interim. However, at second interim, we did receive notice of some new federal COVID relief funding. This will be referred to as ESSER 2. It's approximately $90 million, and we were able to incorporate that into our multi-year plan. The ending balances have improved, but we want to just keep in mind that we do have some deficit spending still projected in our out years, and we're going to monitor that closely. So this is a little bit of an update on our unrestricted general fund revenue and the change year over year. As you can see, last year we received about $771.8 million. And you can see the projection has reduced this year. That's mostly due to a 0% COLA. But in the out years, this is what I was talking about the governor's budget, and a little bit of a large increase in the 21-22 year. And then we follow with some small decreases, or some actually a little bit large decreases over the next 2 years. And I'll get a little bit into that on the next slide. So what affected our revenue? There's a couple things. The good news from the governor's proposal is a 3.84% cost of living increase. So when we started at first interim and brought you our report in December, the proposals were at 0% for all years. You can see the next 2 years have a small cost of living of 1.28 and 1.61. Both of these become factors in the increased revenue that we are showing. We still have an enrollment loss of a little over 3% for this year. And we continue a decline in enrollment as we have in the past few, several years. We continue that outward, but we're hoping that we won't experience a 3%. Our average has been about 2%. This is the good news for this year. The revenue increase was mostly, if not all, due to the hard work of our sites to increase the applications for our unduplicated pupil count. And we got a 4% increase between our December reporting to you and coming back in March that resulted in an additional $6 million of revenue for this current year. That was an exciting activity. The expenditures, we've showed this before, and we do have a slight decrease in this year. A lot of that is related to some changes in just the fact that we've had distance learning rather than in person. But you can watch, part of our expenditures have gone back to normal levels, is what we're anticipating for the years following. And we do have increased expenses. Those are some things that I've talked about before related to some retirement costs, health and welfare, just the cost of operations at a school district our size. There is just an ever increasing possibility for expenditures. So a little bit about the factors that we've included. I think it's important to know that we have included both supporting in-class and distance learning. As we've monitored this situation, we've been able to anticipate that we are going to be returning to some in-class instruction, and we'll have expenses related to that. And we do have distance learning continuing. So in our projections, we've incorporated both of these costs so that we can keep you informed with the best possible outlook of our expenditures. We do anticipate that our spending trends return to previous levels in 21-22. As you saw on the last slide, that is quite, an increased expense, but basically we anticipate that we'll have the expenditures return to previous levels next year. So where does this information leave us? We've talked about revenues for this year. We've talked about expenditures. And basically that leaves us with an unrestricted ending balance. That's the balance that I like to call something like our savings account, what's in our account. Keeping track of these balances is a great way to look at the fiscal health of our district. It'll provide us some cushion if we have some balances in the event that there's a downturn. Again, some of these balances were brought into the COVID years and have provided some cushion. And it also demonstrates the relationship that I've been talking about between revenues and expenditures. So these are unrestricted ending balances for the next few years. You can see that we've had some increases in this year. That's again resulting in some savings from expenditures, as well as some increased revenues. Just like I talked about, the $6 million, some increased anticipation of revenues in the out years with the COLAs have all resulted in a little bit of good news. But what I talked about earlier is that we do have plans to deficit spend in the 22-23, 23-24 year. You can see that the change in prior years, we're going to start losing our unrestricted ending balance. And again, this is a result of increased costs and reduced revenues. And it's something that we're going to continue to monitor closely. So on the next slide, I want to show you what that looks like. I brought you this slide at first interim. It was a little bit of a different tale. Again, with 0% COLA and the additional revenues not coming in from the state, it actually was a very sharp turn downwards. So we still have the downward turn on our unrestricted ending balance, but we're hopeful that we have some time to continue to look at our expenditures, look at our revenues, and take note of the things that we can do to improve this situation. Finally, I want to leave you with some thoughts for the next steps. Again, I alluded to the governor's May revision that will come out in May, and we will incorporate those revisions into our next report that will come to you in the June timeframe. It will include estimated actuals for this year, 2021, as well as our budget for 21-22. Shortly thereafter, around that same time, the state budget will be adopted. Again, we'll be able to make changes if we need to. The adoption of the district budget and LCAP will come in June. And along the way, we continue to review our programs and prioritize our spending. We have continued engagement of the community in our budget prep process, and we're going to continue that process. And I believe we're coming to you even in the next 2 weeks to provide some update on our community engagement around the budget.
I move to approve.
Second.
Discussion.
Thank you, Renee, for all of your work. I think when you talk about your fun news is different than other people's fun news, and I always love to hear that. Just a quick question for staff. We know that the LCAP was designated an LCAP last year, but had a different meaning. Do we know if it's reverting to the LCAP that we knew before, or will it continue as it did in the pandemic year.
Yeah, it's reverting to a full LCAP. And actually at board workshop, you'll hear from Renee and Yumi and the Equity Access Office and Dr. Salazar about the budget engagement activities and the timeline for this spring's adoption of the LCAP.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, Dr. Benitez?
I have.
Oh, you do have more discussion, I'm sorry.
A couple of questions. One is obviously our budget is also impacted by our enrollments. And so we were experiencing about a 2% or so enrollment decrease every year. I think it's important to be mindful that we really don't know where we're going to end up next academic year, right? Given that so many people in our communities have been displaced because of our pandemic. So just want to highlight that that's also an important component. And then Renee, I know that you explained it several times, but just for our viewers and our community members, our unduplicated students, those are our socioeconomically disadvantaged students that we receive funding based on, right? So our free and reduced lunch program. So I want to just highlight the importance of having an accurate count and to remind our community members that, again, when we use words like equity, that 2/3 of our students are poor, basically by the indicators that we use. And so when we make decisions on behalf of our district, that we use that data to not only make our budget decisions, but also any interventions that we're planning, that we're thinking of. So I appreciate your question, Board Member Kerr, about our LCAP, right? Because there are clearly defined populations that we should continue to, again, try to direct funding and support to, but that's also contingent on us having accurate counts on who our students are so that we can provide them the interventions and the support mechanisms with that. So I guess my second question is, I didn't even ask a first question. I think I answered it myself with the enrollments thing. So my question is more for Dr. Baker, and you alluded to it earlier, Dr. Baker, that we are eligible for this $6.6 billion, right, that the state has allocated. And we have until June, right, to adopt the plan here. I know we don't have the details as to how we're going to spend that money yet or what have you, but I think it would be important, Dr. Baker, to highlight that because we have some time, how critical and important it is for us to listen to our community stakeholders, right, and help inform sort of what our priorities are with those funds that we're now eligible for. So if you could just speak in general terms, Dr. Baker, because I know that we just became aware of that and that hasn't been hashed out yet, but that I think it's important for our communities to know that we're going to do our due diligence to make sure that those additional funds go, where they need to go. So Dr. Baker, anything you want to add?
Absolutely. So we're in a really good position to support our students, both the return to school and also interventions that have already begun. And so I think Dr. Lund mentioned, or it could have been Mr. Moskowitz mentioned, that you approved contracts for additional tutoring resources. There were assignments in today's board actions to elect teachers for Saturday school and after school tutoring. And so I just want to be clear that many of those services are starting now, even if they're taking place in an online environment. Renee made reference to over $90 million of federal relief money. I made reference to $70 million of additional state money that's coming in. And of course, there are some restrictions with the ways that those funds can be used, but they are targeted for the most at-risk students to support what's being called learning loss or learning recovery. We're thinking of it around learning acceleration, supports, enrichment, and recovery. And so we will be coming out to you all for approval of starting with a summer plan that will include both academic supports, social emotional supports, and enrichment in a way of including arts and music in the plans that we have for summer. So, it's a strange time. We're being very cautious about long-term plans. But in the short term, we have a lot of funding to support our students' return. And I think as students come back into the buildings, we're going to be able to provide different kinds of services than we have been able to in the last year. So lots of support money for our students, and we'll be making a good investment. In terms of the timeline and engagement, Dr. Benitez, what you're going to see our team come out with at board workshop is to show you what I think of as an enhanced LCAP process. So there's a compliant version of having engagement opportunities for the LCAP. What our team has put together, especially because of the work they've done over the last year, is an enhanced opportunity. None of the data has gone away that was collected in the fall. So we had many engagement opportunities in the fall. They've held on to that data. It has informed things like the tutoring contracts that you saw come to board in the last meeting, but they will continue to engage the community, parents and other stakeholders, and our students, and increasing student voice in that process to make informed decisions, because our students actually have a lot to tell us about their needs as well. And so we'll post timelines and opportunities. I also want to acknowledge our parent university in anticipation of all this interaction for parents around budget. Budget is complicated. So what Renee just provided for you is incredibly complicated work. And I want to thank Yumi and Renee and Susan and their teams. We will actually post the presentation and or a memo that actually simplifies all of this for our public. It will be translated and posted in some way to support them. But it's very complicated subject matter, and I think our team is really, really trying to bring it to a place where the community can be involved in the decisions that we're making.
Thank you, Dr. Baker.
Mr. Miller.
And Jill, I couldn't help but smile as you were giving your responses here, because I think you answered a lot of my potential questions. But I did just want to emphasize at least my thought process to our viewers here and community members, as when we're talking about learning recovery, I think about it very similar to financial recovery. If you've gone into debt before, or if you've had an injury to a body part, you have to make a certain level of sacrifice or an additional investment to a certain extent to recover back to a certain point. So if we're going to help those students that are suffering from lost learning, we're going to have to put some additional resources focused towards those communities and students in particular. And as I'm happy to see the healthy budget that we have as an organization, I do recognize that there's potentially some tough conversations ahead when we're talking about recovery, but I think we're in a really good place. So thank you, Renee, and thank you, Jill, for your explanation.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor, Dr. Benitez?
Aye.
Ms. Kerr?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Otto?
Aye.
And I vote aye. So hearing no one opposed or no abstentions, that passes 5-0. Next on the agenda, we have the Equity Policy Development Update. Dr. Brown.
Thank you, President Craighead. Good evening. I'm really pleased to share that we had the second meeting of our equity leadership team this past week. We have 30 really passionate, hardworking committee members with tremendous urgency around the topic. They asked for homework. They demanded homework, actually, because there's more to do than can be done in any one meeting. And we're extremely appreciative of the commitment of the group. We are working toward the creation of an equity policy that we will bring to you by June. That's our primary task right now. It's also important to share that the equity leadership team work groups that we have engaged, about 120 people have also met since we last were together. And the role of those groups is really to be a review team. So the equity leadership team is the development team of the policy, but the work groups are the review team. So that when we are bringing a policy to you, you can know that it has not only been developed and edited and modified by the equity leadership team, but that it's been vetted by about 120 other participants who are also passionate and interested in this topic. Going forward, we will be bringing that policy to you by June, and we'll be doing that with the idea that our equity policy is a starting point. It's an umbrella of further work to come. It's not a policy that we think will live for 5 years, but rather one that will need to be fluid as our efforts change and flow. And also it will be a policy by which we look at other key policies that we have in the district and infuse the lens of equity into those areas. So it's not enough to have an equity policy. Our further work will be to infuse the way that we are visioning, working towards creating a more equitable system in all of our areas specific to hiring practice, recruitment of staff, curriculum, decision-making, student discipline, the list goes on. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. Appreciative of the group that's working together, and look forward to sharing more with you as we move forward. Hi, Dr. Benitez.
Dr. Brown, as you know, this is one of those areas that I've been so excited about, right? So wondering if you could touch on a little bit. So it's great to hear that this group wants to work. And in many ways, one of the spaces that, among the many, Dr. Brown, that I saw your work really pay off for us with our CAC group, right? Just to name one. I'm wondering, what is your sense, right, since you've been in a lot of these spaces, and again, given just the challenges of one, you know, bringing this work into the space, what is your sense in terms of, you know, in the first couple of months of this group, in areas that you may have had to either pivot or rethink, and or, you know, based on your wealth of experience, some of the learnings where you've that have caused you pause, Dr. Brown. I guess that's what and again, not saying that it's not going well or not trying to, you know, evaluate the work, but just getting your sense of where things are right now.
I appreciate the question, and I share your excitement around the work, and I'll give a very candid answer. This is important work. This is work that comes with a lot of lived experience, and a feeling that it's past due. And so when something's past due, there's not enough air in the room to contain it. And that's what we're working through. We're working to capture the experiences of the group. We're working to create a sense of connection and relationship amongst us so that we can have hard conversations and do hard work together. We're working on engagement in hearing those experiences, and we're working on a product. And so, yes, I have tremendous pause because it feels very important, and it feels like a critical next step in our going forward. But I also have tremendous optimism about the power that is in the room. I have belief that we can not only work well together, but that this group really has opportunity to have impact. But I would be remiss if I did not say that there is a lot of institutional mistrust that we are working through. I both acknowledge that and really want to hold responsibility for that. And I believe that a way to go forward in that space is to acknowledge it, and then be extremely authentic in the process. We do not have an equity policy that has been created already that we are trying to bring to this group to rubber stamp. We need real input from them, and we need that so that we can go forward knowing that we have engaged our community and the experiences of our community in a way that is real. So I appreciate your question, and I am giving a candid answer. I look forward to giving more because I think that that is a way through.
I so appreciate your candor, Dr. Brown, and that's why I felt comfortable asking the question because it is really hard work. But also just acknowledging because he started off saying they want homework, right? They want more work. The impact that this is going to continue to have on our district conversations in multiple spaces, and just the acknowledgement that the homework that they'll be doing is being acknowledged, right? That folks are giving up their time to help guide our district on a path that we know we need them on. So thank you for that candor, Dr. Brown.
Thank you.
Okay, did we have any other questions or comments about this? Thank you, Dr. Brown. And thank you to all of our volunteers who are participating. Now we go to report of board members. So we'll start with Mr. Miller.
All right, thank you. I have a number of things that I wanted to report on. First, I just wanted to acknowledge Women's History Month. Fairly new, but in the same token, it is an important recognition as we recognize the world's better half. So with that said, I wanted to acknowledge a special lady to me and to the district, as she was my representative when I went through the Long Beach Unified School District, and Ms. Bobby Smith. She was our first African-American female board representative, and now she has one of our elementary schools named after her, but she did 14 years on the board, and I remember being very proud and humbled to see her as a representative of our board, and so I just wanted to acknowledge her in this moment. Next, I also wanted to acknowledge and congratulate all the people that participated in the Black History Caravan that happened at Washington Middle School on Saturday, I think that was. This was hosted by Habitats for Humanity, and it was a continued outcry, and I want to commend all of the folks that participated in it and commend all of the folks who continue to uplift Black voices. I just think that the social awareness that we all have at this moment for a community that's been disenfranchised, like I continue to say, has been quite humbling. And then I have a distant nephew, as folks will learn. I'll share a small anecdote. In the African-American community, you got a bunch of nephews and nieces and cousins that you may not really be blood related to, but you love them just the same. And so I had a distant nephew who's a part of ASB over at Hughes who participated this weekend, and he was a little disappointed that I wasn't able to attend the event at Washington. So I wanted to congratulate Aaron for his hard work. Last but not least, I also wanted to acknowledge the great work of the College Promise program that's going on at well, it's Zoom, obviously, but the College Promise Male Leadership and Empowerment Summit. This is in partnership with our own Male Academy. This year, it's obviously held virtually, and they've had a number of really cool presenters. They had Eric Thomas on the second, hip hop preacher, that's what they call him. He's a really cool brother. They also have a great speaker tomorrow, and Dr. Cesar Cruz. They've done a number of panel discussions. I've worked closely with the Male Academy over the past 10 years or so. I think it's been really proud of the work that Lionel Gonzalez and all of those young men have been putting forth, because I think that this is a really great group. If you're interested in attending the final day, which is tomorrow, and seeing that presentation by Dr. Cruz, visit Eventbrite and then just type in Male Summit and it'll come right up. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Ms. Kerr.
Yes, thank you. I'll be brief tonight. I just want to thank staff, as Mr. Moskovitz said, for operationalizing plans that have long been in the works, and really including the voices of staff and teachers as we create a return to campus plan, again, while supporting all of our students as they continue to learn throughout the year, the rest of the year. The Voices of LBUSD is a group that puts together work around Black History Month. They're doing Women's History Month and disability awareness. So for those of you on social media, I would implore that you check that out. Our media services team has done a fabulous group of videos around Black History Month, and continue to do good work to uplift the voices of our diverse community here in Long Beach. I just want to express gratitude to them for continuing to do that work. I want to acknowledge everyone who took the time to participate in public comment tonight. As we heard, there is such a diversity of opinion, of concern, of plans, of hopes, of what this year continues to look like for our families and for our community. And the pandemic has not been perfect, and we know that how we respond isn't perfect, and it continues to evolve. And I'm grateful for the work that our teams are doing to put that together. And I'm hopeful that they will continue to listen as we've made adjustments throughout the year around screen time, around asynchronous learning, really listening to our community and to our staff around their needs as we move into this next phase of being together in a new way for some folks, that we continue to be open to the possibility. I know today we just had information regarding childcare options available in CDC and Head Start. And kids clubs options. I would hope that as we continue forward, if more options become available, we'll make those available to our families and to our community to continue support the needs of our diverse students. So thanks to everyone who's doing that work, to our families who are still struggling to make the best choice for them in tough times. We hear you and we're listening. And to our students who continue to work hard every day, for our students who continue to struggle with engagement, we see you and we hear you, and we want you to be in community with us. So please continue to talk to us about how we can best meet your needs.
Thank you. Dr. Benitez.
Thank you, Madam President. So I want to start off by acknowledging that awesome video that we started off our meeting with from our Cambodian community member, Khmer interpreter, translator. I was in two spaces in the last week that really highlighted to me two things. One is the importance of two-way communication between our district and our community members. I was at a COVID-19 community teach-in organized by some community organizations with my colleagues, Kelly Callipy and Dr. Davis from the health department. And there were a lot of questions, many we didn't have answers to that night, but we provided, I think, a lot more information since that time. But the second thing that it highlighted for me is the importance, and I know I brought this up, of interpretation, translation. So I was happy to see in our business department report tonight that we did also allocate more funds for our much needed interpretation and translation services. So thanks for those organizers for the COVID-19 teaching. Thought it was a successful event. And inevitably, probably more than half of the questions asked were around the reopening of schools at this COVID-19 teach-in. The other opportunity that I had that highlights those 2 points about two-way communication and just our commitment to language accessibility is I was interviewed by the Long Beach Immigrant Rights Coalition earlier this week in Spanish. And again, just fielding general questions, but witnessing also the hunger of our Spanish-speaking communities to be engaged, right? And I know that it's hard for folks. Again, I'm really, really curious who was watching on YouTube today, especially in Spanish and in Khmer. It's hard for folks to get our information to participate in these spaces. But I think in partnership with our community partners, we had about 100 folks watching, and we were fielding questions from our Spanish speakers. So I would love for us to explore opportunities to do more of that in partnership with our community partners, because it is a heavy lift for our district and for our community partners. I think, Madam President, you mentioned, or it may have been our superintendent, that we'll be meeting at Browning for our board workshops. And I wanted to make a suggestion on our public comment, right? Because at times when we've gone in person in the past and then back to virtual, we've had this conversation right around how we handle public comment. I would suggest that because we obviously are getting a lot of public comment virtually, that we continue our phone system that we have. As I understand it, we're already paid through this academic year with that contract. And that way we uphold our commitment to providing our community engagement, particularly for those community members that may not be able to or may not feel comfortable coming in person with us. So those are just my thoughts. I know that we'll have more conversations about that, but I wanted to sort of bring that to light. Let's see here. I got two more things. Oh, I got vaccinated yesterday by our own Long Beach Unified School nurses at Cabrillo High School in coordination with our city's public health. So I wanted to express my appreciation for everyone that made that possible. Truly a collaborative effort, but made possible by our city's commitment. And our mayor has been a champion of this to make sure to provide opportunities for all of our educators to be vaccinated, right? And so it was wonderful to see Tuesday, 500 LBUSD employees at a high school campus being vaccinated by a team of 32 of our LBUSD nurses and support staff. So thank you to everyone. Our media services was able to document that. I think a YouTube video is out there somewhere in English and in Spanish. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to just remind our community members, vaccines are coming, not at the rate and the number that we want. But if we do have an opportunity to vaccinate ourselves, to not just do it for ourselves and our families, although I think that's very important, but to also do it for our community members, right? Particularly in those communities, as my colleagues here on the board have emphasized, have been hardest hit, that the only way to keep our rates down is to continue to social distance, wear our masks, limit our contact, limit our interaction. But now that some of us have an opportunity to vaccinate ourselves, that's another way to do it. And so I'm taking this opportunity to speak to our communities of color that for many reasons have a distrust of our health system, have a distrust of our vaccinations. So I also did it in the spirit of wanting to be public about how important it is to be vaccinated. Everyone has to make their individual choice, but if you do have the opportunity, that we're doing this also to set an example for other community members that as soon as that vaccine becomes available, we'll have to make that decision, right? So in line with our commitment to test, in line with our commitment to vaccinate all of our employees, I think it's important to continue reminding our communities, particularly the hardest hit, that this is an additional layer of us wanting to be safe. Again, not just for ourselves and our individual families, but for our communities as well. So thank you for that opportunity. And thank you, Media Services, for documenting that. And I did a version in Spanish too, on the fly. So I appreciate that opportunity. And then lastly, and we already touched on it, thank you to our school site staff for all the work that they're doing to continue supporting our virtual instruction, but that it's a super heavy lift to be ready to go. And I got a good sense of that. And I remain hopeful that if we keep doing what we're doing, that we can bring students back and that at some point we will be back and have the opportunity to be back in person. Everybody knows that in person is the preferred option. And I don't want folks to feel bad that either chose the virtual option or are unable to bring their students in person, that our commitment is still to do right by our virtual instruction. So I appreciate the hybrid options that we have, the in-person and the virtual options that we have. And we're almost in the middle of this rest of this academic semester here. So I think one of the silver linings and I understand why our staff may not necessarily want to highlight this all the time, but I'll take the liberty to do this, is that this is also an opportunity for us to get it right, right? Versus, making it just a unilateral everyone in person, that we're going to learn from this. So we continue to ask for folks' patience and grace through this process, but to also show that grace to our other students and our other families that for whatever reason are not going to be participating in person, right? And I'm speaking here to those students that may be in that position where either the communication about whether they were going to be in person or virtually didn't occur at the household, and they found out either through a friend that we were going to be back in person or through a classmate. And for us to just show grace, right, for those students that I know all of them want to be back in person. I know my daughter wants to be back in person, but every family, every household, every situation is different. So thank you to all the work that everyone's doing to do right by our all means all mantra.
Thank you. Mr. Otto.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I want to echo some of the things that Juan has said tonight. I think every day at length about going back to school. I hear the public comments, and as I hear them, I almost want to reach out and say, but we all want this. And the question is, how are we going to do this, and how are we going to do this in a way that we all do it together? It's a learning opportunity that I think that we really need to take advantage of. I am so impressed with the planning that has gone into this very difficult subject. I hear so many people say, go back to school tomorrow. I mean, that's what you need to do, is to just get everybody back. And or the CDC says that we can go back, so why can't we go back? And I know it's a very complex question, but I also know that it takes time. I don't think there's been a lot of delay for no good reason. I think we've had to meet the standards and get there. But as we heard from our educators tonight, we're ready. We have plans. They're complicated, but they're well thought out, and they're clearly designed to do what we need to do and to give everybody an opportunity to get back into education, which is so important. And and by the way, with regard to public comments, I think Juan makes a good point. I think that if we continue through the end of this year with public comment online as opposed to in person, we can learn a lot about public comment, especially if we put our shoulder to the wheel. And I'm always interested in us making the best public comments opportunities that we can. And I think we can learn from what it is that's going on now. So I support the idea of continuing that we've paid for already, and listening closely. We can get transcripts. We can see the number of people that are coming forward and the groups that they represent, and maybe it'll help us in how it is that we do our outreach. What I've been doing in the last since the last board meeting is a great deal of training. I've now been on this board for approximately 2 months, and not that long in terms of participation, but just in the last week, I think my wife and I added it up, and there was 20 hours of training through the California School Board Association, through the gentleman and his firm that we have hired to do training here, and I'm learning a lot. In fact, I think the phrase that I've repeated more than anything else during this time has been, "Oh, I didn't know that. Is that the way that works?" My wife said, if you can get out of March and know 50% of the acronyms, you'll be fine, because you've got to understand that, and you've got to know that. I did about a 10-hour session on on new Board of Education members. A week ago, Friday and Saturday, we had training last Monday night. Eric and I participated, and then we had Wednesday afternoon, all afternoon with what it is that we're thinking about. And I'm a bit of a student of governance in general, but I'm hearing things that I hadn't heard before, and that's very interesting. The importance of spending our time at board meetings on student outcomes and how to do that, how to make our agendas more compliant with that, and to keep that in mind, because that's really a lot of what it is that we do. I'm excited about the budget stuff that's coming up, because I really want to understand K through 12 budgets. I know there are these deferrals, and I think we're in a wonderful position compared to many K through 12 districts. We've been fiscally prudent over time. It's a testimony to our staff and our former staff that we've done that, but that doesn't last forever. And so we've got to be very, very diligent. And I'm watching it to try and understand what the things we're doing is. We talked about, we did the second budget statement today, but they mentioned, well, the governor gave us a budget in January, and then there's going to be May. And what I always thought was, here come the May revises, and they can knock you out of the water, or they can help you. And I'm pleased at the position that we're in right now, but there's a lot to learn about how we can be saving money to support our students and do what it is that we need to do for them. And then finally, what I would say is, I am so impressed with the staff here. I'm so impressed with how hard they work, how thoughtful they are, how they work with one another well. Brian called me up, and Moskovitz called me up and said, hey, would you be willing to go to Lowell, a school in my district, to talk about what's going on? And you heard me earlier tonight talk about the kinds of things that I learned, and how impressed I was with the way the district is going after these issues. And so there's a long way to go. We're not at the end by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm glad to be here, and I'm trying to do the best I can. So thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate all the comments from my colleagues. I love the focus on gratitude and the acknowledgement for the hard work that's gone into everything. So I'm not going to belabor that point, but in honor of Women's History Month, I just would like to congratulate Cabrillo, Lakewood, and CAMS. They have earned the College Board Advanced Placement Computer Science Female Diversity Award for achieving high female representation in AP Computer Science Principles classes. And this is the second time Cabrillo has earned this honor. So kudos to them. And now we will go to our superintendent for our superintendent's report.
Thank you. Just a couple of things to end on tonight. First of all, I would like to thank Mrs. Craighead for facilitating a board meeting on her birthday. You really know how to have fun on your birthday, Mrs. Craighead. Thank you. Honestly, your service to our community is something to celebrate. I want to thank the mayor and the city staff at the health department. As of this Saturday, every one of our employees in the school district, teachers, custodians, nutrition workers, central office staff, maintenance workers, all of our employees have had the opportunity to be vaccinated. And that is a story to tell across this nation. We are being called upon for our collaboration, for our partnership. It wouldn't be possible without the city's early identification and securing doses for educators. It also wouldn't be possible without the leadership of our Board of Education and our staff. And so there's a great story to tell, because that collaboration existed before the vaccines existed, and we've built on it through managing COVID over the last year, making good decisions with our health department and being advised in a way that we can rely on good advice and good recommendations. And what it led to was early planning about a vaccine program as we saw that coming. And so our employees are in such a good situation to be able to be vaccinated. We're on to some last groups. We're looking at student teachers to get vaccinated, and hopefully we will be able to offer to some of our retired employees that come into the district on a part-time basis and do some work. But we are grateful that as of this weekend, everyone has had an opportunity. Tomorrow, just a reminder, tomorrow comes our weekly, right now, community message from me. It comes in print and video, so you don't want to watch the video. You can look at the print notes that will reiterate many of the things that were shared this evening. More importantly, elementary parents, if you have TK through 5 students, remember, you are on the lookout tomorrow afternoon for information from school sites where you're going to get across the district information, but specific also to your school information about these weeks to come and how you can be prepared. And lastly, just want to then remind everyone, Mrs. Craig had announced that our board workshop will be back together for a day and a half of learning, a commitment our board has made over time to not just having meetings that go late into the evening, but have held time as learners and thinking about student outcomes and where we're heading as a governance team. So March 16th and 17th, as you've heard, we'll be together at Browning High School. And there will be opportunities for public comment as has been described. And then the board meeting will follow that night. The business meeting will follow that night also at Browning High School. We will be physically distanced, more than 6 feet, will not have contact in the room with one another, but we'll be able to be in company of one another safely. So I look forward to that opportunity to learn and grow with you and for you to interact with our staff who has been working so hard. Look forward to seeing you on March 16th.
Thank you. Next, we go to announcements. Are there any announcements? Yes, Ms. Kerr.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate my thanks and appreciation to the city's team for their prioritization in vaccinations. And there are vaccination clinics happening for our communities. I know Central Cha has another community vaccine in the community event happening this Saturday. So be aware that different community organizations and faith communities are also reaching out. So if you're looking for the vaccine, those community groups can be of assistance. Your council offices can be of assistance to help drive information about in our community vaccine programs that the city is doing. So I encourage folks, if they're still waiting on a list, that there will be some opportunities in your own neighborhood. So be on the lookout for those.
Thank you. Do we have any other? Yes, Mr. Miller.
Yeah, as I went through my long litany of things to recognize, I forgot to recognize your birthday as well. Happy birthday.
Thank you, but you're just extending the evening. So with no objection, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for sticking with us, and especially everybody who's been here since dark 30.
Happy birthday, Diana.